presenting final bargaining positions this week as federal mediation comes to an end. The pilots' union is preparing for a strike after 5 years of trying to negotiate a new labor agreement with UPS. Pilots' union spokesman Brian Godet lays out the issues that are important to UPS pilots.
The number one goal of this contract is improving safety, and the way that we want to improve safety is by better schedules. Fatigue is a huge issue for the pilots at UPS. The FAA has instituted new flight and duty rules for passenger pilots, but unfortunately cargo pilots were carved out of that. So improving our schedules, better safety, mitigating fatigue is basically job one.
Godet says that pilots have opened a new strategic strike center in Louisville, Kentucky to better coordinate strike action if needed, but the pilots are hoping they can come to an agreement with UPS without a strike. Godet says that the pilots are overdue for improvements at UPS.
We want improved wages. We haven't seen a pay raise since January 1 of 2012. We want to improve pensions. The average pilot now is in his or her early 50s, so they're starting to pay attention to that. And obviously, like everyone else, we want to keep an eye on health care.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. Well, first, Bruce Springsteen canceled a concert in North Carolina to protest that state passing anti-discrimination protection for the LGBT community. I know another boss with an equally powerful voice is also speaking up. The boss we're talking about is the commissioner of the National Basketball Association, Adam Silver, who is moving toward taking next year's All-Star game in Charlotte and moving it elsewhere because of North Carolina's so-called transgender bathroom law. This would be a major blow to the Charlotte economy, which would stand to lose $100 million in revenue if the NBA pulls out of the home of the Hornets. Silver knows something about North Carolina, spending his college days at Duke University. These days, he's also a member of the Duke Board of Trustees. He usually makes the right calls on these kind of issues. Remember, it was only 2 years ago when, relatively new to his position, he ousted longtime Los Angeles Clippers owner Donald Sterling after he was found to have made racist comments about Magic Johnson and other African-American people. Although the league should have acted sooner to force Sterling to sell the team, Silver's move to impose a lifetime ban was universally hailed. Now he'll no doubt have the backing of his 30 owners, including Charlotte owner Michael Jordan, if there is no change in North Carolina's law. The NBA has always had a track record of being the most progressive of all major sports leagues. Leaving Charlotte is the right thing to do. Adam Silver knows it, and he will act on it accordingly.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
It's time for the Rick Smith Show.
I want you to get up now. I want all of you to get up out of your chairs. I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell, "I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not going to take this anymore!"
I don't want to abolish government. I simply want to reduce it to the size where I could drag it into the bathroom and drown in the bathtub.
You bet I cut the taxes at the top.
How dare you? How dare you? Go ahead. Make my day.
The Rick Smith Show starts now.
Welcome, brothers, sisters, working class heroes. This is the Rick Smith Show. Thanks for being here. Today on the big program, lots to get to, lots to talk about, because tomorrow's the day. Tomorrow's the big day here in Pennsylvania and in 4 other states across the country. When we decide who is going to be Bernie, going to be Hillary, going to be the Donald, going to be Kasich or Cruz, and a whole bunch of other things down ticket as well. It is primary day tomorrow. I hope it's on the calendar. I hope folks are planning to get out and vote. You know, look, I don't think I should even have to say I hope people will. And I guess that speaks volumes of where we are as a country. Get out and vote tomorrow. Get to the poll. It's a couple of minutes. It's not that big of a deal. Get there. Because look, this like they say, I think they say this every election cycle, but this one really more than any in my lifetime, this is a big one. This is important. We're at a really pivotal moment in the country right now, and I think everyone should kind of be involved in it. Are we going to be crazy? Are we going to follow a very bizarre right-wing, scary kind of mean, hateful, hooray for me and kill everybody else mentality? Or are we in this together? Is there the opportunity that maybe we can forge a better path? To me, tomorrow, that's really what we're going to be asked to do here in Pennsylvania and in other states across the country, in Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, and Rhode Island. We're going to be asked, hey, what do we want to be crazy? Do we want to follow the insanity that we see going through the South and the Southwest and in some of our Rust Belt states as well, or going to come back somewhere near sanity? And you go, well, Rick, how can we be anywhere near sanity when you hear about the story that came out of Philadelphia yesterday? And it's a good question, because I had a bunch of people say, did you see this? Did you see this? Yeah, I saw it, and it's a horrible, horrible thing. For those who don't know, there was a guy who's running for state rep, a guy named Chris Rabb. I think I've met, actually, in one way or another. The name is familiar, and I the face also, I think we've crossed paths, I'm sure. But he's running for the 200th legislative district seat against a Democratic incumbent. I think it's a three-way race, actually. And he was out campaigning, saying, hey, you want to come, make calls for me tomorrow? You want to come? And on a Sunday afternoon, he, I guess, moves away from this guy, this 21-year-old kid that he's talking to, only to have the kid, gunned down in the middle of the street. And you go, wow. And then there was another shooting, another deadly shooting that the police think were related. And I kept going back to who wants to run for that district, or, to be honest, what kind of people should we be getting to run for that district to try and clean that mess up? And to me, it comes back down to jobs programs. It comes back to education and also the policy. I mean, you look at this horrible tragedy and you bring it all right back to the decisions we make as a society on Election Day. The decisions that we make not to fund education, the decisions that we make not to fund job training programs, the decisions that we make to not give people opportunities and pathways, especially in the minority community where, we've got all this money to do a lot of talking, but actually getting on the ground and doing real stuff doesn't seem to happen as much as I would like to see. But this is just one of those things. Wow. Almost 4 o'clock in the afternoon. You don't expect to be, standing out on the street corner having someone gunned down. But the sad reality is in a lot of these neighborhoods, this is the reality. And over the weekend, while I was away, I've been away the last couple of weekends with my grandmother in Cleveland and everything that's going on there. And thank you to the folks who have emailed their well wishes. I appreciate it. I had an opportunity to sit down with a friend. I grew up with years and years ago, and it's one of those things that we haven't talked in years. But I was back in town, and I said, hey, let's have lunch. So he came to the hospital. We sat down. We had lunch for a couple of minutes, and we were reminiscing about the old days, the poor old days, where we didn't have anything. I mean, we're all broke. Everybody suffered the same kind of situations where the cupboards were empty at the end of the month. Everybody had tattered old clothes with holes in their shoes, and everybody was in the same boat. And we didn't know any better because it's all we saw. And we were going, in this world of the internet, in this world of instant gratification and instant everything, knowing what's going on in the world, honestly, why are we still putting up with it? And we had both agreed, back when we were that age, had we known that there was something better, we'd have been fighting like hell for it. Instead of, and then again, I guess we came back to we were too busy fighting each other. We were too busy fighting each other for the scraps, fighting each other for spots on a team that there were too few of, fighting each other for in line to get the school lunch program, and just kind of constantly at each other. And we both kind of like, what if we were to take that energy and move in a different direction? And I look at this stuff; it comes back to policy. And our elected officials, they're just not. I'm sorry, they're not. They're not looking for the future for us as a society, unless you're a Koch brother or one of the well-to-do. And this election, to me, has a lot of that in it. You know, do we have an opportunity to make things better, or do we make it worse? And at which point, you know, there's part of me that goes, if we're going to make it worse, let's not just make it a little bit worse. Let's make it really worse. Let's go all the way till finally people wake up and go, can't take this anymore. And then there really will be that backlash, that revolution, that everybody awake, everybody involved. So tomorrow's a big day. Now, here in Pennsylvania, the expected results of the presidential race are Trump and Clinton. That appears to be what the polls are leading us towards. Both Hillary and the Donald hold sizable double-digit leads. On the Republican side, Trump has 45% of the likely primary voters, Cruz 27%, and Kasich 24%. Trump, his supporters are, you know, the people without college educations. More than half of the 52% of people without college educations are Trumpites. And, you know, look, it is what it is. People who live in the northeast part of the state, 52% Trumpites. Men, over 50%, 52% of men support Trump. And there you go from there. He does not so great among college graduates. Only 37% of college graduates are talking about voting for him. 39% of women. White evangelicals, 40%. But here's the thing. He's still leading Cruz and Kasich in those categories as well. On the Democratic side, you've got Hillary 15 points up on Bernie, 55-40. It is an older state. It is what it is. Clinton leads among African Americans 67% to 29%. People 45 and older, Clinton has a huge, massive lead, 67-28. Among women, 62-34. And, you know, self-identified Democrats, 60-36. On the Sanders side, he's got the young folks, people 45 and under, 60-37. People who label themselves as very liberal, 58-41. Independents, those folks in the middle, but good luck, you're not voting, 55-39. And men, 49-45. He holds that. If you were to choose one of those who are going to run against each other, Hillary beats Trump by 15 points and beats Cruz by 11, but loses to Kasich by 3. On the Bernie side, if Bernie runs, he beats Trump by 20, Cruz by 22, and Kasich by 6. So you look at that and you go, well, you know, take that into consideration, if you will, when you go to the voting booth tomorrow, but by all means, to the voting booth. The poll also looked at President Obama's job approval ratings here in Pennsylvania, 49%. Governor Wolf's approval rating of 45%, and Pat Toomey's, the senator here from Pennsylvania, at 43%. So I look at this and there's hope. There's hope that maybe we come to some rational thought, and it's, I got to be honest, very exciting that Pennsylvania still in the ball game. So tomorrow, 5 states across the Northeast here, Pennsylvania, Connecticut, Delaware, Maryland, and Rhode Island will be making their choices. And like I've been saying all along, all of us are still relevant, and that is a good thing. When we come back, we're going to talk with one of the Bernie supporters about why Sanders, why should we be feeling the burn tomorrow? And the other question, if he goes down 55-40, is this the end of the campaign? I'm hoping not. Going to take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. The governor of South Carolina sent 1,000 state troopers and National Guardsmen to Charleston, South Carolina. They were sent there to deal with the striking hospital workers who wanted union recognition. The strike had started on March 19th at the Medical College Hospital. A little over a week later, more than 60 black workers from the Charleston County Hospital joined the strike in solidarity. The governor was determined to use every tactic at his disposal to break the strike. He worried that if the strikers were successful, unionization efforts would spread throughout the other sectors of state employees. During the strike, a hotel room of one of the union organizers was bombed by an unknown assailant. Soldiers with bayonets marched through the streets of Charleston. Hundreds of picketers were arrested, including teenagers who had joined the protest. The governor had gone as far as imposing a 9 p.m. curfew on people to keep them off the streets. But the workers were determined to win their rights. The United Auto Workers sent $10,000 to support the striking workers. Civil rights leaders from across the nation came to South Carolina to support the workers. Andrew Young and Ralph Abernathy of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference were among those who were arrested. Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. King, gave a speech saying, "Hospital workers have been working full-time jobs at part-time pay. After all, $1.30 an hour is not a wage, it is an insult. I also have another interest in being here," she said, and that is many of the hospital workers throughout our nation are women, black women. Many of them are the main supporters of their families. The hospital workers were able to win a grievance process and modest pay increase. Although they did not win union recognition, they inspired hospital workers across the country. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Stephanie Salmon. Republican-controlled state legislatures across the country are introducing and passing so-called bathroom bills targeting the transgender community. Listen to Media Matters' Carlos Massa and ACLU attorney Chase Strangio discuss the bathroom predator myth behind these bills.
Proponents of these laws claim they're needed to stop sexual predators from dressing up as women and sneaking into women's restrooms by pretending to be transgender.
We're concerned about the safety of the women. We're concerned about the safety of the young girls.
What they are doing is participating in a falsehood that allows trans people to be associated with intrusions into privacy, with violence, and with harm to other people.
A Media Matters study has found 0 proven incidents in the more than 17 states and 200 cities where transgender people are currently protected from discrimination and allowed to use public bathrooms that correspond with their gender identity. For their full conversation on the bathroom predator myth, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
And they're giving up on the political process because they understand the economy is rigged. They are working longer hours for lower wages. They're worried about the future of their kids. And yet, almost all new income and wealth is going to the top 1%. Not what America is supposed to be about. Not the fairness that we grew up believing that America was about. And then sustaining that rigged economy is a corrupt campaign finance system undermining American democracy, where billionaires, Wall Street, corporate America, can contribute unlimited sums of money into super PACs and into candidates. Our job together is to end a rigged economy, create an economy that works for all, and absolutely overturn Citizens United, one person, one vote. That's what American democracy is about.
They offered me the office, offered me the job.
got to be honest, you listen to Bernie talk, and the reality is we grew up with that mentality. You work hard, you play by the rules, you get ahead. And the sad reality of the last 20, 30, 40 years, what's gone on is we've gone after destroying unions, destroying workers' abilities to make their lives better, and they've been asked to work harder and work harder and work harder, still playing by the rules, but again, falling further and further behind, which is why I think the Sanders campaign has done amazing work this season to get people focused on inequality and focused on how do we have an economy that works for all. And here in Pennsylvania, tomorrow, decision day. I hope everyone gets to the polls, but here to talk a little bit about why Senator Sanders should be the guy that is voted for tomorrow and eventually in the White House. I've asked Tom Payne-Cronin. He's former president of AFSCME District Council 47, also one of the Bernie Sanders surrogates, to come talk with us. Tom, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
So you heard in the intro clip, the economy's rigged, people are working harder and longer and not getting ahead. I think that's a message that resonates.
Well, so do I. I think it's a message that resonates, and I think once you get into the particulars of whether it's domestic issues or foreign policy issues, it becomes even clearer.
So, you look at the polling, though. Why here in Pennsylvania, after years of job losses and years of deindustrialization and horrible trade policies and all of the things that the Bill Clinton era got us, why is Hillary still so far ahead?
Well, you can speculate a lot on that, but I think one of the things that's at least been clear to me, I've seen one or two in-depth analysis on who's getting this type of the print or the airtime, the media time. And when you compare, for example, Bernie Sanders with Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump or some of the other candidates, he's really getting the short end of the stick in terms of getting a message out to people and getting some publicity.
And I would agree that the media culture in this country sidedly on the corporate side, but at the end of the day, this is where I think unions and this is where I think progressive groups have to try and get united behind someone like Sanders. And I don't know that we've seen that. At least I don't think we've seen it.
No, I don't think we've seen it, and I think that that Bernie Sanders has given the media, I think, every opportunity really to focus in on his message and give it more time, and they just haven't really done it, and that's very disappointing to me.
So let's talk about health care. That seems to be one of the big differences between Hillary and Bernie. Bernie, like me, single-payer guy, something we should have done, open up Medicare, fix a price to it. Seemed very simple at the time, but the Hillary people are saying we can't go back. We've got to fix what we've got. Do you see that as a huge difference? How do you see that?
Well, I do see it as a huge difference because I think I agree with Bernie Sanders in terms of universal health care. I think that's what's needed. I think when Hillary comes back into debates and says, well, we can't do that, it's unrealistic, let's do it piecemeal, I always think to myself, it's wonderful to be wealthy because then you can take your time and do things piecemeal. But when you see people out there, whether you're working for a union or living in a city or a rural area, and you see how people are struggling to get health care, I think we need it now, not piecemeal. I don't know what piecemeal means,
right.
But I don't think we have the time to just waste for this and just say piecemeal.
But Tom, isn't that the same argument they gave us for why we needed Obamacare, why we had to pass the Affordable Care Act? Because us those rich people who still have health care, they've got time to wait. It's the 32 million people who didn't have it. We had to get them these subsidies and private insurance. Wasn't that the argument then?
That's right, and that's her argument now because she steals, I think, a lot of slogans and so on from Wall Street. It's unfortunate, but true.
Yeah, I mean, at the end of this, and I'm going through some healthcare stuff with my grandmother, and it's amazing to me how the system isn't geared towards helping people. It's about how can we profit, how can we make money, how can we save money and not give care. It just seems everything in the wrong direction. So when I hear Sanders talking about we should have universal health care, that when you're sick, you go to the doctor and you don't have to be like my 86-year-old grandmother on her deathbed worrying if she could pay the bill, that seems dumb to me.
It seems dumb to me, and it's also cruel because I think, people shouldn't have to really make choices about health care and paying the rent or mortgage or shoes for their kids or groceries. I think that should be a given. I think that's, we're supposed to be, we hear this over and over again, the last big democratic, industrialized country that doesn't really have universal health care, and I think that's a real shame.
But, isn't the education process in this as well, is that we would save money? I mean, because I know people from Montreal, I know people from the UK, and they all tell us the same thing, that their health care is good. When they're sick, they go to the doctor. There may be some things that we're better at here in the U.S. because we pay so much more for it, but they don't pay anywhere near what we pay in costs to insure everyone, and not just the profiteers.
Yeah, that's right, and I think it's time that more people wake up and really start to demand that we have universal health care.
Yeah, is it? You think it's possible in this day and age?
Oh, absolutely, it's possible. I think anything's possible if you generate enough support in the street to push politicians to do things. I mean, that's what it takes. It takes grassroots support, people getting in the street, people raising all kinds of hell in every single way they can to push these politicians to do it. Otherwise, if you depend upon them, then you're going to do it piecemeal, way down the road.
Yeah, I think we learned that in 2008, most recently, when President Obama, as candidate Obama, said, you can trust me, none of those trade deals, and trust me, we're going to do EFCA, and trust me, we're going to do all this stuff that I'm still waiting on.
Right, that's right. Well, it was the same argument, of course, many years ago in this country on the issue of civil rights and human rights. You would hear the people who were opposed to increased civil rights saying, "Oh, listen, go slow. Let's just take it piecemeal. It's down the road. Take your time. Don't be so militant. Don't be so strong about this issue." Well, it takes people in the streets, really, I think, to get things done.
Right, and you go back to the Roosevelt years, and there's a famous story that Bill Moyers tells about Roosevelt saying, "If you want something done, make me do it."
Right. That was his conversation, I think, with A. Philip Randolph in the White House.
And Randolph did. He threatened to
That's right.
Have thousands of people in the streets over discriminatory hiring practices. And out of the threat of getting people into the streets, Roosevelt signed an executive order to try and end some discriminatory practices in the hiring of workers in the war machine.
That's right, Rick. That's what it takes. It takes people in the streets. No matter what the movement is, the progressive movement in this country, it always takes people generating the support from the bottom up, really to the top.
Yeah, and at the end of this, Tom, one of the great things that I think Sanders has accomplished thus far is bringing a whole bunch of people who weren't in the political process to it. My question becomes, though, if tomorrow doesn't go the way I hope, or a lot of people hope, or the way the polls say they're going to go, even though I don't put a lot of credence in polls anymore. If it doesn't go that, what happens to that movement? What happens to those people? Do they all go home, or does something else spring out of this?
Well, I certainly hope that they don't go home, because I think listening to Bernie Sanders, that no matter what happens in the Pennsylvania primary, the Delaware primary, that this kind of movement for combating wage inequality has to continue. I mean, it must. It can't just stop. I mean, voting is certainly extremely important, and it's one tool that people need to use to change the system or improve the system, but it's not the only tool. So hopefully there'll be grassroots organizing. People will do what they need to do, fight whatever way they can, whether it's through government or out in the streets, to get things done. Yeah. It takes all of those things. It always has, again, whether it was the civil rights movement or the peace movement, it takes people doing all kinds of things, putting their mind and their task to it to get something done.
Yeah, well, I mean, from the beginning of the country, it was about an active, engaged, informed electorate.
Right.
And that was the hope, that we would be that. Sadly, I talked to some of my Trump supporter friends, that informed, that educated. I kind of question a little bit of that. You listen to the Rick Smith Show here with Tom Payne Cronin, former president of AFSCME District Council 47, also one of the Bernie backers, a surrogate for the Sanders campaign. One of the big differences that is being thrown out a lot is Secretary Clinton, obviously, as former Secretary of State, has what some would say a much bigger advantage on foreign policy. And a lot of folks are saying, Bernie's not talking about foreign policy at all. I'm curious your thoughts.
Well, listen, would I like to see him talk more about foreign policy? Absolutely. Although I think the big issue to most people in this country is wage inequality. I think that the business of foreign policy, he has talked, somewhat about it. And I think that, the issue, for example, of Iraq, where she voted for the war, she supports the war, et cetera, and he doesn't. I mean, that's disconcerting to me in terms of her foreign policy, quote, expertise. I mean, you can look at that expertise, whether it's been, in quote, in Iraq, or whether it's been in Libya, or the no-fly zone that she wanted in Syria, or what happened in Honduras in terms of her, support, really unvocal support, but quiet support for the coup in Honduras. I don't think these are good things. I think these are bad things. And so if that's the expertise that she has, save us, please, from that.
Yeah, I think as one of the people I spoke to recently said, she's right on all the issues now, not so much then.
No. I mean, when you take a look at what her foreign policy is, my concern and what I honestly believe is that if she does win the nomination, I think the American people are going to be in the streets again protesting another war. I just think she's too much of a hawk. I think she's proven that in terms of her statements on various countries, and that's of considerable worry to me. And I think it's the opposite of where the American people really want to go.
Now, let me ask you this then, because, I don't hear that frame very often. I've read a couple articles, and I personally know she's more of a hawk than President Obama is. And maybe you're right. Maybe we end up back in another conflict. I haven't heard that come out of the Sanders campaign, or is it just that maybe it just wasn't reported and it did come out?
Well, I don't know. But I clearly, I think when he talks about his foreign policy record as opposed to hers, I think it's a big difference. I think it's a big difference, and I think that she comes out as Hillary the Hawk.
That's another one of those things that are going to have to be considered tomorrow on Election Day. Last minute, I've got here a why make the pitch on why Sanders and not Hillary.
Well, I think, again, whether you talk about domestic issues or foreign policy issues, he's been consistent, and is a decent, honest man who doesn't really mend or change his message with the political winds. He's there. It's clear where he is. He stays on point, and he's been that way for years. And that's, I think, what the people see in him is what they get. With her, you get constant flip-flops, changing, and her positions, again, whether it's on things like health care or foreign policy intervention, are not good. They're just not good.
Yeah. Well, again, there's something about being right and right when you needed to be. That correct. I agree with you. Tom, I appreciate you taking time for us. Best of luck tomorrow to the campaign, and I'd love to have you back to kind of evaluate what happened yesterday at some point.
Anytime, Rick. Thank you.
Great talking with you, Tom Payne-Cronin. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
So many things went so terribly wrong and tragically wrong in Flint.
Criminal charges for officials in Flint water crisis.
We're still suffering from the BP disaster.
Louisiana residents protest new offshore drilling on anniversary of BP oil spill. Deadly oil facility explosion kills 3 in Mexico. Plus,
Harris points in one direction, but that is only a blueprint.
This Earth Day, world leaders gather to sign the historic Paris Agreement to fight climate change.
All of that history and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
I'm looking forward to the day when it's renewable energy running politics. But imagine the day where mobsters are like, you take care of me, I'll make sure you got a nice set of solar panels on your roof come spring, capiche?
Capito, this is your Green News Report.
Renewable energy.
Okay, Desi Doyen, I know you got a lot to get to today, but I want to welcome our newest affiliate partner. Very excited about this. WGRN 94.1 in Columbus, Ohio. And not only are they WGRN, they are the Green Renaissance Network.
Oh, I like them already.
I thought you might. All right, what do you got for us today?
Well, first, criminal charges in the Flint water crisis. At a press conference on Wednesday, Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette charged 3 officials, 2 state environment officials and 1 city water official on 18 felony and misdemeanor counts.
They failed. They failed in their responsibilities to protect the health and safety of families of Flint. They failed Michigan families. Indeed, they failed us all, and I don't care where you live.
The 3 were charged with misconduct in office, misleading federal officials, and conspiracy to tamper with evidence, including falsifying testing documents. Michigan officials denied there was a problem with Flint's water for nearly 2 years after a state-appointed emergency manager switched the city's water system to a new source to save money.
And the Attorney General has promised there will be more charges against other officials as well.
Yeah, he said he practically guaranteed it. Meanwhile, Flint's water is still unsafe. Wednesday marks 6 years since the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, when an explosion aboard the Deepwater Horizon offshore drilling rig killed 11 men and caused one of the worst oil spills in world history. The Obama administration this week issued the latest 5-year plan opening up new areas for offshore drilling in the Gulf with new standards for blowout preventers, a crucial piece of equipment that failed 6 years ago. Residents of the Gulf, however, are demanding no more drilling on their vulnerable coastline.
We're still suffering from the BP disaster. We still have oil that comes in. We lose about a football field an hour of land here in Louisiana, and a lot of that has to do with the oil industry. If we continue to invest in this long-term plan that keeps us locked to an infrastructure that poisons our people, steals our democracy, and causes long-term damage to our ecosystem.
Wildlife in the Gulf still suffers. On Tuesday, NOAA scientists found exposure to BP's oil was the likely reason behind a mass die-off of baby dolphins in the Gulf. In Mexico, at least 3 people are confirmed dead, dozens injured, and hundreds evacuated after a large explosion at an oil processing facility in the state of Veracruz, owned by a subsidiary of Pemex, the state-owned oil company. It's the latest in a series of deadly explosions at Pemex facilities in recent years, but in a statement, Pemex assured that oil exports would not be affected.
Oh, good.
Meanwhile, more than half the U.S. population lives amid dangerous air pollution, warns the American Lung Association in its annual report, The State of the Air. 160 million Americans, more than half the nation, breathes dangerously polluted air, and nearly all of that air pollution comes from burning fossil fuels. Finally, Friday, April 22nd, is the 46th annual Earth Day. Earth Day 2016 is special. Leaders of at least 150 nations meet at the United Nations headquarters in New York to sign the landmark Paris Agreement, the historic international emissions pact reached in December, in which nations agreed to limit global temperatures from rising more than 2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 degrees Celsius, if at all possible. UN Climate Chief Christiana Figueres, at a speech in London, said as difficult as it was to get 195 nations to agree unanimously on anything, that was the easy part.
Now we come to the difficult part, because now we have to be intentional about everything that we do, about every investment that we do, about everything in our daily lives. We need to be intentional about the choice that we're making. The choice needs to be made, it needs to be intentional, and above all, it needs to be urgent.
The agreement goes into effect once 55 countries representing 55% of global emissions join and ratify it. The U.S. and China, representing 40% of global emissions, are on board.
And they're all expected to sign on Earth Day this
Yes.
year? Well, that is very good news for Earth Day indeed, although, as we say around here at the Green News Report,
every day is Earth Day.
Exactly. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
It's a beautiful day.
Exposing GOP hypocrisy. The Rick Smith Show.
Well, it seems that John Kasich is vetting vice presidential candidates. That's fun, don't you think? I mean, hey, give the guy credit for at least, appearing to think that he's got a shot. I give him credit, honestly. But he says, he's on Face the Nation, and, hey, things come quickly, and you don't want to have yourself in a position where you've got to pick somebody out of a hat. I've been working on it for a while. I got to wonder, how many people are going, yeah, throw me on that list, please. Put me on the third place list. Now, as I understand, look, what's going to happen in Cleveland at the Republican convention, a lot of people are speculating. And when things turn away after the first ballot, does someone like Kasich have a chance? He thinks he does, and which is the reason he's still in it. And they're also, him and Cruz are doing some backroom dealings, as they're going to. Because the establishment, they're trying to figure out how they get Trump out the door. And, can you blame them? The answer, no. Some interesting numbers. Hillary Clinton, if you saw this is one of those things over the weekend that kind of caught my attention. Evidently, the Koch brothers were interviewed and, basically said they're not putting any money whatsoever into stopping Donald Trump. He says, look, these are terrible role models, all of the Republicans, all of them bad. And they're actually saying that they might sit this presidential election out. And then they chimed in with, David Koch did. Charles Koch did. He chimed in with, Hillary might not be bad, which got people going, hey, does this mean that you're going to be spending money on Hillary as opposed to one of the other ones? And, well, he says it's possible. It's possible that the Koch machine could throw their support behind Hillary, to which the Hillary camp quickly tweeted out that they were not interested in the endorsements from people who deny climate science and tried to make it harder for people to vote. So I guess no money coming from Hillary or coming to Hillary from the Koch folks. But it is kind of interesting when the Koch folks have been going, spending all this money on the Republican Party, and it's now out of. Imagine how you would feel if you've spent all of this money building this machine for you, building this infrastructure that you controlled because of the money that you've invested in, and now to find that it's really gone off the rails. I mean, it's crazier than you could have imagined. And look, there were a lot of people saying that we're going to get to this point. The Republican Party at some point has to implode because it's being taken over by really very radical people, and we've become this polarized team sport kind of political society where, rational people don't go, well, we're going to go over to the other side for a little while until you get your act together. That hasn't really happened as much as you would think with a party that's really crazy. And it's now become my team. As bad as they are and as much as they do horrible things and they get us into wars and they give billionaires huge amounts of money and they've created this huge investor class while everybody else is struggling to put food on the table. And, oh, by the way, we're not going to raise the minimum wage and we're going to cut, social programs. And we're going to kick kids off of CHIP insurance. We're going to throw people off of food stamps. We're going to drug test them all, knowing that it doesn't work, but it's our team doing it, so we're going to be happy with it. And we're going to continue to pull the lever for these insane people. Now you've got Koch going, wait a minute. Yeah, we wanted all of those things, yes, but we didn't think you'd lose your freaking minds. And this is, in my view, this is the Koch machine going, trouble. And, even starting to think about how they make a purer, and wait for this, because I think it's coming out of the implosion of the Republican Party as we know it. What comes out of that? Do we see the Koch party? Because understand, Koch is a libertarian. Actually ran as vice presidential candidate, I think it was 1980, on the libertarian ticket. That's the stuff that's really creepy and scary to me. But we shall see. Just amazing stuff. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Controversial, thought-provoking, opinionated. Rick Smith.
Wow, $5 billion. That's the stunning amount that Goldman Sachs has agreed to pay to settle federal criminal charges over its shameful financial scams that helped wreck America's economy in 2008. That's a lot of gold, even for Goldman. Yet, the Wall Street powerhouse says it's, quote, pleased to swallow this sour slug of medicine. Is that because its executives are contrite? Oh, come on. Banksters don't do contrite. Rather, they are pleased with the settlement because, thanks to backroom dealing with friendly prosecutors, it's riddled with special loopholes that could eliminate nearly $2 billion from the publicized punishment. For example, the deal calls for the felonious bank to put $250 million into affordable housing, but generous federal negotiators put incentives and credits in the fine print that will let Goldman escape with paying out less than a third of that. Also, about $2.5 billion of the settlement is to be paid to consumers hurt by the financial crisis. But the deal lets the banks deduct almost $1 billion of this payout from its corporate tax, meaning you and I will subsidize Goldman's payment. As a bank reform advocate puts it, the problem with these settlements is that they are carefully crafted more to conceal than to reveal to the American public what really happened here. This is Jim Hightower saying, one more reason Wall Street bankers privately wink and grin at these seemingly huge punishments is that even paying the full $5 billion would only be relatively painful. To you and me, that sounds like a crushing number. But Goldman Sachs raked in $33 billion in revenue last year alone, so it's a reasonable cost of doing business. After all, Goldman sold tens of billions of dollars in the fraudulent investment packages leading to the settlement. So the bottom line is that crime can actually pay if it's big enough.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
From UN headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. The United States signed on to the 2015 Paris Agreement on Friday, joining 170 other nations in backing the most robust climate change treaty to date. In remarks before signing the treaty, Secretary of State John Kerry praised the deal that he helped to craft.
The power of this agreement is not that it, in and of itself, guarantees that we will actually hold the increase of temperature to the target of 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees centigrade. In fact, it does not, and we know that. We acknowledge it. The power of this agreement is the opportunity that it creates. The power is the message that it sends to the marketplace.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said he's already looking forward to next steps.
The next critical step is to ensure that the agreement enters into force as soon as possible.
The difference between signing the deal and it entering into force is important. To become legally binding, the Paris Agreement requires ratification by 55 countries representing 55% of global carbon emissions. Just 15 countries came to the UN on Friday with ratifications in hand, and most of them were small island nations that emit little. But there looks to be progress just down the road, as the U.S. and China plan their own ratifications. China said Friday that its national legal process should be complete by September, while John Kerry said the U.S. will formally join the agreement this year. Since Senate approval of the treaty is unlikely, President Obama reportedly intends to sign on to the Paris Accord through executive action. The U.S. and China combine to account for roughly 40% of global emissions. After John Kerry affixed his signature to the Paris Agreement, the UN General Assembly erupted in applause. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Remembering that united we bargain, divided we beg. Rick Smith.
To this battle, take my Union gun. Gonna end this world of slavery, for this war is one you're bound to lose. You fascists, goodbye.
Well, tomorrow, the big day. Make sure I know it's on the calendar. You just got to get to the polls tomorrow. And, 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., you've got that window. Pick some time, get out and vote. And here talk a little bit about why tomorrow so important, why we need to get out and vote. I've asked Rick Bloomingdale, president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO, to come talk with us. Rick, thanks for taking time for us.
Yeah, Rick, always a pleasure to be on the show, especially on a day like this.
So here we are, all of this work, all of this prep, getting to tomorrow. What are you expecting?
Well, I think with the presidential race having come to Pennsylvania, it wasn't settled early on either side, either the Democratic or Republican side. I think we're going to have a pretty good turnout as primaries go. Unfortunately, I don't think it'll be as big as the general election, but I think in terms of primary elections, I think we're going to see a pretty robust turnout for both the presidential, the Senate, the Attorney General, all the races down ballot, State House, State Senate. So I think it'll be a busy day tomorrow with the polls.
Last week we spent an opportunity to get all of the statewide candidates to come on and talk about their positions, why them. Because look, outside of the presidential race, and look, that's exciting as all can be. There's some decent and good statewide races to watch as well.
That's right. We got excellent candidates running. In the Democratic primary to face off against Toomey. Of course, the AFL-CIO has endorsed Katie McGinty as the strongest candidate and a strong supporter of working families. And certainly, we think Katie would be a great candidate against Pat Toomey. So we're encouraging people to, no matter who you're supporting, though, to get out and vote, take advantage. They've constantly, there are forces on the other side, usually people who are being manipulated by multimillionaires and billionaires, who have decided that the only way to control democracy, they can't win on their ideas, so they try to rig the rules against going out and voting. So they tried to do voter ID in Pennsylvania, and we do. For first-time voters, they will have to present their ID. But for experienced voters have been doing this a while, your signature's good enough, as it should be, because most people aren't accomplished forgers. So if you sign that book and it compares to the signature they have on file, that's plenty in order to get to vote tomorrow. So, we've taken down that barrier. We could do a little bit more on early voting, but, the absentee voting is well, your ballots had to have been in by Friday. But, in terms of, we're fairly good on absentee voting, but, some states have been so far ahead on taking down their barriers to voting. California and Oregon just did this. You're automatically registered to vote unless you physically opt out. Right now we have a system where you have to physically go register. Well, now you can do it online, but you have to take an affirmative step to register to vote rather than the other way where you have to take an affirmative step to not register to vote. Of course, being registered doesn't guarantee that people are going to get out and vote, and that's why campaigns get out and do what they do, door-to-door, phone banks, all those kind of things. They'll have people at the polls. If you don't know some of the down-ballot candidates, there hopefully be a poll worker to tell you who they are and tell you about them. So, this is one of the greatest processes in the world. We're so fortunate in the U.S. that we have, we don't change offices by violence. We change it by going to the polls and making our selection. And, unfortunately, too often we don't take advantage of that opportunity. And we would just encourage, tomorrow is the first step towards a general election, that people get out, exercise their right to vote.
A moment ago, you said that there's an effort afoot to try and limit people's access to the ballots, and we see it in states all across the country. The photo ID you brought up, and there have been polling places that I've gone to over the years they've posted signs saying you have to have an ID. We know that we don't unless you, as you pointed out, a first-time voter. What should people do if they come across that kind of behavior? Maybe a poll worker, maybe somebody who's there, or may just be somebody in line trying to stir up trouble. What should folks do?
Well, I'm sure there will be various hotlines, and I don't have the number with me, but I'm sure the Pennsylvania Department of State probably has an election problems hotline that they should call. But most county parties should have lawyers on hand to try to solve those problems, and hopefully there will be poll workers who know the law. Look, sometimes people are malicious and mean-spirited about letting people vote. Sometimes it's just ignorance. We have the people who go and work at the polls all day, and I give them a lot of credit. They're there. They got to set up at 6 o'clock so that those polls are ready to open at 7. And then when the polls close at 8, they're busy packing up all the stuff and getting the ballots to the county courthouse, although a lot of that's done electronically now, but they're still there till 9, 10 o'clock. So they're spending from 6 to 9, and I think they get $100 or $150 for the day to do that work. And then there are volunteers who come in. That's the election official, and then there are people who come in and volunteer all day and do that. And sometimes, because laws have changed, sometimes it's just people don't know, right? So if you're aware of election laws, and somebody's asking a question, if you know something, you should help people out. I mean, like I said, sometimes it's malicious, and we've certainly seen incidents of that where, folks have showed up at African-American precincts with cameras and dark glasses and suits to try to say that we're the FBI and we're going to, intimidate them with some kind of false security personnel. We've seen that happen a lot in Philadelphia to try to intimidate African-American voters. Obviously in Maricopa County, Phoenix, they had 400 polling places 2 years ago. This year they had 60 or some crazy number like that, so that people had to wait hours to vote. Now, in other parts of the state, Tucson, which is a Democratic county clerk, they had plenty of polling places, and there were no lines in southern Arizona. So it was clearly a partisan thing that the Republican Party decided that they were going to make it as difficult for people to vote as possible. And they were, I don't know if everybody waited in line. Maybe people went home, and that's the intent. When they create lines, the intent is to send people home.
Yeah, well, any of the barriers that we see created is to limit people to the access to their ballot box, which is why I'm hoping tomorrow we get out in large numbers and vote. On the other tickets, I mean, there's an interesting attorney general's race as well. Have you guys weighed in on that?
No, we were neutral, and that'll come out however it comes out. The negative ad by one of the candidates, I think, shouldn't have been done. They're, I think, all pretty qualified candidates, and I didn't think they needed to go negative in this race. But that's campaigns, and it's unfortunate. But now with the AFL-CIO stayed neutral in the Attorney General's race.
Right. Now, let's go to the presidential. It's great to be still relevant in the presidential campaigns, which doesn't always happen here in Pennsylvania. Have you guys taken a position on the presidential race on either side of the political divide?
We have not. That's up. The National AFL-CIO makes the endorsement in presidential races, like we do in the U.S. Senate here in PA and Congress and State House and State Senate, but the National AFL, and they have chosen to stay neutral. But I would like to remind people that on tomorrow, because I've gotten a number of questions, there seems to be quite a bit of confusion because on the Republican side, while you'll vote for one of the Republican candidates, their delegates are uncommitted. But some delegates have said they're for certain candidates, but you don't know who. So you can't just vote for the candidate, you have to vote for their delegates. Now, on the Democratic side, the candidates, you vote for the candidates, proportional. So if a candidate gets 60-40, they split the delegates 60-40. So if there's 6 delegates, one would get 6, one would get 3, and one would get, I guess it'd be 4 to 2. 3 and 3 or 4 and 2, whatever it is. But at any rate, the delegate candidates are marked on the Democratic side. So if Sam Smith, let's say, Bugs Bunny, if somebody's running as a delegate for one of the candidates, they'll be marked. The Hillary delegates will be marked Hillary Clinton. The Bernie delegates will be marked Bernie Sanders. So the Democratic side will be clear. Now, you do have to vote for the delegates, because they'll decide. That'll decide who goes to the Democratic National Convention in Philadelphia.
Well, that will be interesting to see what comes out of tomorrow. I'm excited for the big day, and I appreciate you taking a little time and sharing some of your thoughts on it as well.
Well, Rick, it's always a pleasure to be on the show, and don't forget, folks, to vote tomorrow. As Rick said, the polls open at 7 a.m. and close at 8 p.m. Get out there, get a chance to vote for the candidates of your choice, and it'll be a great election day.
There you go. Rick, I appreciate the time. Thanks so much. Rick Bloomingdale, president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. Quick break, right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. UPS and the Independent Pilots Association are presenting final bargaining positions this week as federal mediation comes to an end. The pilots union is preparing for a strike after 5 years of trying to negotiate a new labor agreement with UPS. Pilots union spokesman Brian Godet lays out the issues that are important to UPS pilots.
The number one goal of this contract is improving safety, and the way that we want to improve safety is by better schedules. Fatigue is a huge issue for the pilots at UPS. The FAA has instituted new flight and duty rules for passenger pilots, but unfortunately cargo pilots were carved out of that. So improving our schedules, better safety, mitigating fatigue is basically job one.
Godet says that pilots have opened a new strategic strike center in Louisville, Kentucky to better coordinate strike action if needed, but the pilots are hoping they can come to an agreement with UPS without a strike. Godet says that the pilots are overdue for improvements at UPS.
We want improved wages. We haven't seen a pay raise since January 1 of 2012. We want to improve pensions. The average pilot now is in his or her early 50s, so they're starting to pay attention to that. And obviously, like everyone else, we want to keep an eye on health care.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. Well, first, Bruce Springsteen canceled a concert in North Carolina to protest that state passing anti-discrimination protection for the LGBT community. I know another boss with an equally powerful voice is also speaking up. The boss we're talking about is the commissioner of the National Basketball Association, Adam Silver, who is moving toward taking next year's All-Star game in Charlotte and moving it elsewhere because of North Carolina's so-called transgender bathroom law. This would be a major blow to the Charlotte economy, which would stand to lose $100 million in revenue if the NBA pulls out of the home of the Hornets. Silver knows something about North Carolina, spending his college days at Duke University. These days, he's also a member of the Duke Board of Trustees. He usually makes the right calls on these kind of issues. Remember, it was only 2 years ago when, relatively new to his position, he ousted longtime Los Angeles Clippers owner Donald Sterling after he was found to have made racist comments about Magic Johnson and other African-American people. Although the league should have acted sooner to force Sterling to sell the team, Silver's move to impose a lifetime ban was universally hailed. Now he'll no doubt have the backing of his 30 owners, including Charlotte owner Michael Jordan, if there is no change in North Carolina's law. The NBA has always had a track record of being the most progressive of all major sports leagues. Leaving Charlotte is the right thing to do. Adam Silver knows it, and he will act on it accordingly.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Voter ID, which is going to allow Governor Romney to win the state of Pennsylvania. Done.
Yes, our famous Speaker of the House there, Mike Turzai. You know, again, you go back to that whole voter suppression scheme that they attempted to ram through and got signed into law. And fortunately, here in Pennsylvania, we had visionary labor leaders like Rick Bloomingdale and others saying this is wrong, fought it in court, and turned over that voter suppression here in Pennsylvania. But the whole push to limit our access to that ballot still going on. And tomorrow when we go to the polls, remember that there are forces out there saying we don't want you to vote. whoever you vote for, which is why here on the program we've been getting people from all of the campaigns who want to come talk with us, which is why I've asked Bakari Sellers, former representative from South Carolina, to come talk with us. Bakari, thanks for taking time for us.
And thank you for having me on, and I'm glad to hear you speaking about beating back voter ID and any other infringements on our right to vote. I think if any elected official votes to curb your right to vote, that person is a coward that doesn't really need to hold elected office.
I'm right there with you, and I'd like to see Mike Turzai and the whole cabal of folks here in Pennsylvania sent to the unemployment line. But let's talk about tomorrow, because tomorrow is the big day. There are some who are saying we love Bernie, some that we love Hillary. This is about deciding. For me, the big issues are pretty simple. Trade, education, health care, those things. So I thought we'd take an opportunity to go through some of it. Hillary has been attacked on her trade policies, on the ideas that she's going to support things like NAFTA. I know she's come out against the TPP now. Some folks saying that they're not sure that they can believe her. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I think that what we have to do is we have to take Hillary Clinton, especially after she read the complete TPP and then came out and said that it was no good for our country. I think that we have to take her for her word on that. But even more importantly, I think you have to look at the concrete plan that individuals have to create jobs in this country, and whether or not it's the $150 billion that she wants to invest in communities that were devastated, by some of our policies. Where jobs simply picked up and left the country, where you have these companies who were once proud to be in places like Pennsylvania, which now develop their products overseas in China and the such. But what do we do about these communities now? And I think investing in those communities, breaking down those barriers and making sure that we dedicate the hundreds of billions of dollars that are needed, not only educationally, but to stimulate those main streets now, I think is what she's talking about and what's important. So, I think that you just can't talk about something. You have to have a concrete plan and solution to get it done.
Okay, I mean, that seems to be the talking point on everything. But to me, the idea of having big plans and thinking big and then say, as a nation going, hey, let's move forward on that is a good thing. And I go back to, to JFK saying we're going to go to the moon. Everyone thought, oh, you're crazy. You've got no plan to get to the moon. Yet somehow we got there.
Well, I don't think anybody's castigating big dreams per se. But what I do think that there is a realization that you have a Mitch McConnell and you have what was a Boehner, now a Speaker Ryan, who work steadfastly as if they don't want to get anything done.
Right.
But even more importantly, they want to stop you from achieving anything and getting anything done. And so you have to look at someone's record. Although they may dream big, you have to look at someone's record and what indicates that they'll be able to achieve those things that they're stating.
Okay.
Because it's one thing to state something. It's another thing to actually do it.
But what do you say to the people, and I've had some of the Bernie folks come on and talk about building a movement of people to push and to demand those things? Because, look, even if it's Bernie in the White House or Hillary in the White House, either of them are going to have to deal with a recalcitrant Republican Congress. They're going to have to deal with the likes of McConnell and Ryan, as you pointed out.
Oh, I don't disagree with you, but then I think, one of my biggest criticisms, because listen, if Bernie Sanders wins the nomination, which, I think politically and practically probably will not happen now, but if Bernie Sanders wins the nomination, I'm going to be at the front of the cheerleading line talking about I feel the burn too, because I just feel as if Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton are both light years ahead of where our country could be with Donald Trump or Ted Cruz. So I am on that team, so I don't want to get that confused.
Good.
But what I will say is that one of my biggest criticisms is that it's okay to state that you want to have a revolution, but we have to begin to build that from the ground up. And Hillary Clinton has raised $40 million for down ballot Democrats and state parties. You can't deny that.
Yep, that's a valid criticism. I've got a friend John Fetterman, who's feeling the frustrations over that as well. I'm with you.
And I had a chance to meet John Fetterman. He actually came to I was speaking in Pittsburgh, and he actually came to an event there. Impressive. I can't discount how impressive he was. But I think that that's indicative of what does this revolution mean? I mean, does this revolution mean the three people who endorsed you then help them raise money by sending emails? Or are you going to dedicate yourself to building these state parties so when these races are over, so when these races for president are over, in the midterms, they still have funds to build, that have the necessary building blocks. And I think that's a valid criticism.
It is. I'm not going to disagree with you on that. But there are those who, back to the trade issue, are questioning whether they can trust Hillary. And I'm curious, again, back to that, where does she stand on the TPP? And then what comes out of that from the future? Where does she stand?
Well, I mean, I think she's been, I think her position on TPP, where we are today, because, I mean, it's hard to ask somebody to give them, to tell them how you finally feel about something without actually seeing the complete product.
Right. I agree.
And, as soon as the product was completed, without necessarily going out and flipping off the president, she did state in a very, very sincere manner that the TPP was just not where this country needed to be going. And to think that we can't have trade like Donald Trump, I think is narrow-minded, because we're only 5% of the market. But to understand that we need to have smart trade that benefits American workers, I think is where we are.
Right. I'm with you on that. We still have to have trade, because we've always been part of a global economy. For those who are saying it's globalization that's killing us, we've always been part of a global economy. In fact, I would argue that that's how we became a country, protesting against the global economy. So my concern, though, is, I sat 20 feet from President Obama when he was a candidate, and he said, you can trust me. I'm not going to pass Colombia. I'm not going to pass Chorus. I'm not going to pass Panama. And here we are, Chorus, Colombia, Panama, and the mother of all, talking about the TPP. So I think a lot of people have some thoughts on that. And I'm glad you cleared some of it up for us. I did want to talk also about education. One of the big things that Sanders is out there saying is, look, we should have free college education for everyone who can go through it. And Hillary's saying not so much. Can you clarify your position?
Well, I mean, I think that the thought that you can have free college education is one that's impractical. I mean, and let me explain why first. I mean, if someone tells you that they have a unicorn, you need to be able to go back and look behind the barn and see whether or not it's a horse with the ice cream cone on its forehead. The fact of the matter is that this plan costs $75 billion a year.
Right.
$45 billion of which is paid for. The other $30 billion has to come from states. And states like, I'm not sure about the Pennsylvania state budget, but I do know that state budgets across the country are in a crunch, to say the least. They're cutting jobs. They're not funding programs they should be funding, especially in the South and even up in that Northeast area. States are really feeling the burn, and they don't have the ability to spend the $500, $600, $700, even in some cases $1 billion to make this plan work. So understanding that, how do we get there? And what Hillary Clinton said is that if you are a student that can afford to take out, if the school costs $4,000, if you can only afford $1,000, you will pay that $1,000, and the government will come up with a block grant program for the remaining $3,000. And what that is the federal government will then give states the money necessary, states who abide by capping tuition. They will give states the money to make sure that these individuals who do all they can do through work, study, and other things, and who take out the loans up to their capacity, not more than their capacity, then get the rest of that tuition paid for. So it's a combination program of you do what you can do, and we will make sure that even if it's not enough, that won't prevent you from going to college.
No, I mean, it sounds reasonable, but here's my position on it. They used to say that we couldn't have K through 12 education, or actually here in Pennsylvania, 1 through 12 education. You can't possibly do that. It would cost us too much. It would spoil people for work, all kinds of things that we've heard from the past. And yet here we are today. It's almost universally recognized that we're going to have K through 12 education for kids. And at a time when we're talking about you need to have college skills, you need to have job-ready skills, it seems to me that we should be doing something to at least add another 2 years for community college or whatever, just onto what is the norm, instead of putting it on the backs of families by saying, well, we'll figure out how much you can afford and then you'll pay for it.
Well, I don't disagree with you about community and technical college. In fact, I think that Joe Biden and Barack Obama, as well as Bernie Sanders and Hillary Clinton, all agree with 2-year school, and so I think that they're all on board with that proposition. But getting to free 4-year public education, I think is something it's admirable. It's something we can work towards. But how do we do that now? How do we make sure college is affordable now? I mean, are you going to go in front of Paul Ryan and Mitch McConnell in this Congress today and say, look, we want free 4-year college, and it gets struck down? I mean, and then what do we do? So, I mean, I'd rather have a plan right now from somebody who pays $1,300 a month in student loans currently. I want someone who's going to go in and fight to help ease that burden today, work on that burden today, understanding what the reality of the moment is.
All right. Well, that's something for tomorrow for folks to take into consideration. The last thing I wanted to hit you up with is on healthcare. There seems to be a big chasm between the two camps on healthcare. Bernie talking about a single payer system. Hillary saying we should just keep moving along with the Affordable Care Act and fix things that pop up. Am I accurately portraying that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you also have to understand, to put it in the complete historical context, that Hillary Clinton was the original proponent of single payer. I mean, it was before it was Obamacare, it was Hillary Care. I mean, I think that is a fact. But right now, we have an amazing accomplishment by President Obama, which is the Affordable Care Act. I think that anybody recognizes that having 90% of our country insured now is an admirable achievement, understanding that we still have yet a ways to go. And I think that it's more feasible to work within the system that we have passed to get those other 10% than to deconstruct and reconstruct a new system. And so, I mean, I am focused completely on, one, making sure those states that have not expanded Medicaid, I believe you all are lucky enough in Pennsylvania to have that happen.
Yep, thank goodness to Tom Wolf.
Congratulations. But there are states that have not, so that's one thing. And two, making sure that these other 10% get coverage is where we need to be going.
Yeah, I mean, I got to tell you, Bakari, the reality is whatever side you fall on the Hillary or the Bernie side, to me, the best part of this is that we're talking how we move things forward, how we make the working class of this country better off, as opposed to the other side of the aisle, where it's all about how can we destroy and how mean and nasty can we be to one another. At least on the Democratic side, we're talking about, and we may differ on how to get there, but we all want to get to that better place.
I agree with you wholeheartedly. I mean, it's literally, and I think that it's going to be, Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And I think that I don't say this lightly when it's going to be a fight for the soul of this country. And so we need all hands on deck, and whatever arguments or schisms, that Bernie and Hillary have, they are very mild in comparison to where we could be as a country.
John sent me an email here as we were talking. He asked, why not just solve this and have it be Hillary and Bernie ticket? Any chance of that?
I don't think you'll see that. And one of the reasons
either.
I don't think you'll see that is because I think Bernie Sanders, who is the ranking member of the Budget Committee, if in fact we are able to rise some coattails, if in fact we're able to win some Senate seats, he will be the incoming chairman of the Budget Committee. And I would venture to say that is a much more powerful position, especially for someone who's a part of the revolution today in Bernie Sanders, than being Vice President of the United States.
Or as it's been known.
That if I had to choose today, the three choices in order would be Thomas Perez, the Secretary of Labor, Elijah Cummings, United States Congressman from Maryland, and Julian Castro, former mayor of San Antonio and current HUD secretary.
Yeah,
Castro. I think those would be the three you would look out for.
Castro's my pick because he's better looking than Perez. And don't take that in any weird way. It just is what it is.
No, that's funny. I'm actually going to tell Thomas. I speak to the secretary often. I'm going to tell him that you said that.
Well, I guess he'll never come on and talk to us then again.
He will. He'll love it.
All right. Thanks so much, Bakari. I appreciate you taking time for us.
Thank you for having me.
Great talking to you. Bakari Sellers, Clinton delegate, Clinton surrogate. Let's take a quick break. Wow, I'm in trouble. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
The Rick Smith Show.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. The governor of South Carolina sent 1,000 state troopers and National Guardsmen to Charleston, South Carolina. They were sent there to deal with the striking hospital workers who wanted union recognition. The strike had started on March 19th at the Medical College Hospital. A little over a week later, more than 60 black workers from the Charleston County Hospital joined the strike in solidarity. The governor was determined to use every tactic at his disposal to break the strike. He worried that if the strikers were successful, unionization efforts would spread throughout the other sectors of state employees. During the strike, a hotel room of one of the union organizers was bombed by an unknown assailant. Soldiers with bayonets marched through the streets of Charleston. Hundreds of picketers were arrested, including teenagers who had joined the protest. The governor had gone as far as imposing a 9 p.m. curfew on people to keep them off the streets. But the workers were determined to win their rights. The United Auto Workers sent $10,000 to support the striking workers. Civil rights leaders from across the nation came to South Carolina to support the workers. Andrew Young and Ralph Abernathy of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference were among those who were arrested. Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. King, gave a speech saying hospital workers have been working full-time jobs at part-time pay. After all, $1.30 an hour is not a wage, it is an insult. I also have another interest in being here, she said, and that is many of the hospital workers throughout our nation are women, black women. Many of them are the main supporters of their families. The hospital workers were able to win a grievance process and modest pay increase. Although they did not win union recognition, they inspired hospital workers across the country. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Stephanie Salmon. Republican-controlled state legislatures across the country are introducing and passing so-called bathroom bills targeting the transgender community. Listen to Media Matters' Carlos Massa and ACLU attorney Chase Strangio discuss the bathroom predator myth behind these bills.
Proponents of these laws claim they're needed to stop sexual predators from dressing up as women and sneaking into women's restrooms by pretending to be transgender.
We're concerned about the safety of the women. We're concerned about the safety of the young girls.
What they are doing is participating in a falsehood that allows trans people to be associated with intrusions into privacy, with violence, and with harm to other people.
A Media Matters study has found 0 proven incidents in the more than 17 states and 200 cities where transgender people are currently protected from discrimination and allowed to use public bathrooms that correspond with their gender identity. For their full conversation on the bathroom predator myth, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happen!
Demanding the super rich to pay their fair share for once. The Rick Smith Show.
I got a bad case, I'm turning it up. It's getting cold in here, so fire it up. I got a bad case, I'm turning it up. It's getting cold in here, so somebody fire it up.
So I was looking at Elizabeth Warren's Facebook page, and our quote of the day comes from one of her Facebook posts. Evidently, Ted Cruz had sent out a fundraising email whining and complaining that, how much time I spend doing it, and the significant sacrifice, doing the martyr thing that it takes to run for president, that he doesn't have time for his family, he doesn't have time to keep up his health or get any sleep, or he doesn't have any personal time, no enjoyment time. And I think the perfect quote, was by Elizabeth Warren, who said she's got 2 words for him. And it is our quote of the day, boo-hoo. Yes, I agree, boo-hoo. You want to be leader of the free world? Well, that's the gig, man. And, for me, the other part of this is, what about all of the people who work every day, who are struggling to just juggle all of the responsibilities, juggle all of the work, the family, all of the, I got to get my taxes done, got to get the car inspected, got to register this, I got to get the kids signed up for that, all of those things. And, on a healthcare front, how dare you? How absolutely dare you? Where we have a country where there's no paid family leave, there's no paid medical leave, there's none of that stuff. And, you look at people like Cruz who have done everything that they can possibly do to make people's lives worse. Because, I believe in individual liberty and freedom, which to him means you have the liberty and freedom to go hungry. You have the liberty and freedom to go without health care. You have the liberty and freedom to, to live on a cardboard box on the street corner until they sweep you away. You've got the liberty and freedom to die if you can't pay for things. So as I've been saying for a very long time, their health care plan is very simple. Fits on a bumper sticker. It's pay or die. And I look at what my grandmother's going through right now, and she's on her deathbed wondering how she's going to pay the bill. Not because she's at this point delusional. At this point, beyond, now she's just, almost hallucinating and going back to her greatest fears. She's at the bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy. She's scared to death of everything. And one of the things that she's been muttering is, how are we going to pay for this? How can we afford this? How can all of this stuff? Scared. And that's where they like people. And that's what's infuriating to me about their policies. You want to talk about people who don't have time to do things? Talk about the people who are working 2-3 jobs just to try and make ends meet because, you're against raising the minimum wage or allowing people to unionize so they can get better wages, hours, conditions. Let's talk about some of those things. All of the policies that he stands for and the entire Republican establishment, mind you, because there was a point in our country's history where Republicans were not these kind of people. They were like, hey, we're going to watch out for the business owners. And by the way, they're going to watch out for their workers because we're all part of this community. We're all part of all this stuff and all of that stuff. And now it's, hey, hooray for me. Screw you. And I don't think you have to look anywhere further than to look to Kansas, which we talked about on Friday with the Republicans. They're kind of revolting because they're about ready to take a major whipping. Over their governor's plans, over his ideological economic ideas, which is we give everything we can to the wealthy, we pander to business, and we steal from other states by giving huge tax abatements and, hey, why not big giant cardboard checks that are cashed on the backs of our children's dreams? But never mind that. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make sure that the people who are collecting food stamps, sorry, no more for you. We're going to put a 20-hour, I love this, we're going to put a 20-hour work requirement there on it, on the benefit, but there are no jobs. One of the worst states for job creation in the country, because he's followed every single one of the right wing's fetishes. Let's cut taxes. Let's cut. Let's give money away to business. Let's cut social programs. Let's cut education investment. Let's cut infrastructural investment. Let's cut all of that stuff that we know helps and works. Let's cut all that. And on the other end, we'll let people starve in the hopes that they leave. I mean, that's really the goal here. Send them to the other states. Let them deal with it over there. And while I've always been someone who believes in no social handout programs, everything should be a jobs program, they're playing on that division. Because it's easy to go, well, they're just lazy people who don't want to work. They're able-bodied lazy people. Without thinking that, hey, are there any jobs actually there? Are there? Are there any jobs that are within walking distance? Because, hey, don't know if you know, most poor people don't have cars or reliable transportation. Because we've been cutting funding to public transportation for years, and there are a lot of people who don't live on the bus line, so we should just let them starve, or they should move with, I don't know what resources, but hey, they should anyway, pull themselves up, right? That's the rhetoric. And here we've done all this stuff. Kansas has done it all. They've done it all in a very big way. For such a small state, huge. And yet, they're worse off than they were when they started, much worse off. In fact, so much worse off that the Republicans there are about to revolt. Why? Well, there are no jobs. They're losing big time. And their deficits are getting bigger. And the citizens are going, hey, wait a minute. This isn't what we wanted. We didn't want cuts to education. We didn't want cuts to infrastructure. We didn't want cuts that make things, our lives better. Which then takes me back to Ted Cruz and his whining. Oh, boo-hoo, Ted. Boo-hoo, hoo-hoo-hoo. You know, I started thinking about my grandparents' generation and all of the, where my grandmother lives, up until probably just a couple of years ago, they had a crew of people who would come out and take their garbage cans from the back of their house and put them out on the street. And then when the guys came back, they had another crew that took them back. During leaf time, they had a big machine and people who would come by and they would rake up all the leaves and take them away. Snow shoveling, they would have a bombardier kind of thing come in and plow seniors' driveways. During the summer, they had programs that would cut seniors' lawns. They had all of these programs and these things in place out of a reasonable tax base that allowed living to be much simpler. Not constantly worried about, hey, how am I going to pay for the kids to do this? How am I going to pay for this trip? How am I going to pay for them to play sports? How am I going to make sure that our parents are taking all of these social programs that were in place back then were paid for out of the tax dollars. And it made people's lives simpler. We're moving towards a time, and this is where the conservatives want us, to where every time we want to do something, think something, move somewhere, anything, you got to reach into your pocket and pay somebody. And the question is, and this election season is part of that, is that the goal? Do you, when you walk out of your house, do you want to be constantly reaching in your pocket and handing money over? Or do you think that there are things that are part of the commons, that are ours collectively? You know, I remember going as a kid, we used to go swimming at the local pool. If you lived in the area, you got to go for free. If you lived in the community, it was a community pool, it was free. And if you were an outsider, I think it was like 50 cents. For me to go to our local community pool, I got to go give blood before we go. Because it's that outrageous. It's because the tax base has been that badly dwindled by giving it away to the very well-to-do. That, to me, is what tomorrow is also about. Anyway, more to get to as we continue on. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, Kevin Mahoney's going to be here, Editor Zero at Raging Chicken Press. Quick break, right back.
This is Solidarity News on Radio Labour.
This is a Radio Labour news update recorded on Monday, April 25th, 2016. I'm Mark Boulanger. Cambodia has one of the nastiest anti-union, anti-worker records in the world. Now it has passed a new trade union bill which will make matters even worse. Radio Labour's senior correspondent C-Marie Ainsborough has the latest news.
With the support of international labor organizations, workers in Cambodia are protesting a new labor law. The law was pushed through the National Assembly by the government, despite objections by the UN's International Labor Organization, the ILO, the country's unions, and global labor federations such as Industrial. Even a number of multinational garment brands have said they oppose the law. The newly adopted legislation imposes new limits on the right to strike, allows government intervention into internal union affairs, and permits employers to apply for the dissolution of unions. Cambodia has more than 1,200 garment factories, producing about $6 billion in exports. The factories produce clothes for companies such as Gap and Nike. Women make up most of the country's 700,000 garment labor force. They earn a minimum wage of $4.50 a day. That works out to about 12 cents a t-shirt. The new law has been condemned by the International Trade Union Confederation. The ITUC is the body which represents national union centers at the world level. ITUC General Secretary Sharon Burrow told the media that the government has backed the Anti-Union Employers Federation at every step. It has continually pushed back against decent working conditions and wages. The government and police violence against those fighting for the respect of international workers' rights must end, she said. This is C. Marie Ainsborough reporting for Radio Labor.
The largest labor federation in the United States, the AFL-CIO, is releasing a series of videos attacking the Trans-Pacific Partnership. The TPP is a huge trade deal involving 12 nations that produce nearly 40% of the world's GDP. It includes special courts, which multinational corporations can use to sue governments if they think government action has impaired their profit-making. Labor groups are comparing TPP with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which saw many good-paying unionized jobs transferred to non-union companies in Mexico, which pay substantially less. Promises that better wages and working conditions for the Mexican workers have not been kept. One of the videos released by the AFL-CIO focuses on local governments that are fighting the TPP because it will result in thousands of job losses in their communities. DeWitt Walton is a council member in Allegheny County in the state of Pennsylvania.
I've seen too many people have their lives destroyed because their jobs went away. The Allegheny County Council opposed the Trans-Pacific Partnership because they understand the devastating impact that passage of that would have on their communities and their constituents. We can't have a continuation of what's gone wrong. We can't have another NAFTA. There's too much at risk. It's too important. Across the greater Pittsburgh area, across America, people are frustrated by their inability to provide for their families, to have a future. What happens if TPP passes? There will be another generation who won't be able to find work.
Zahara Heckscher is a worker suffering with cancer.
I'm alive right now because of the progress that's been made in medicine. It's these medicines that are the difference between me being alive and thriving and what happened to my mother, which is just dying. I found out that the TPP will actually threaten access to the kinds of medicines that are keeping me alive. What I want people to know about it is the TPP affects human lives. What difference does it make if the medicines are available if you can't access them?
And that's it. International labor news you can use. I'm Mark Boulanger. Thank you for listening. And remember, it's all about global solidarity.
The proud defender of the American dream, Rick Smith.
Well, tomorrow, the big day. I know a lot of folks excited to get out to the polls tomorrow. I got a bunch of emails saying, I can't wait to vote for, and their chosen candidate. Be it Bernie, be it Hillary, be it one of the state races, be it the Senate, the AG's race. Lots of good things to look out for tomorrow. I cannot wait. But I figure we talk a little bit about that with our good friend Kevin Mahoney from the Raging Chicken Press and find out what's going on over there. Kevin, thanks for taking time for us.
Whoop, whoop, whoop. Election day, election day. I'm so excited. I cannot wait to get out to the polls tomorrow.
Yeah, to me, that's how it should be. As a country, we should feel that way. Shouldn't we?
Absolutely. You know what? I tell you what, I've got a 7-year-old and I've got a 4-year-old, and they've been asking me all week to make sure that they're going to get to be able to go to the polls with me and vote. I mean, how awesome is that?
You're one of those weird parents, too?
I am. I bring them right to the polls with me. They get to push the buttons. They get to push it there, and we talk about it, like going up to the campaigns. It's just fantastic.
Yeah, we do the exact same thing. Kids are usually a little bit late for school in the morning. Just because we take them with us to the polls and make kind of an event out of it, because I think is that important to celebrate what I do believe makes us exceptional as a nation, and that is our ability to elect people to represent us. This idea of self-determination and self-governance, I think it's event worthy.
I totally agree with that. I mean, you think about all the production that goes in to celebrating the 4th of July. Not to diminish the 4th of July, don't get me wrong here, but that kind of celebration, right? That celebration on the War of Independence. And for me, that's the same kind of deal when you talk on Election Day. The primaries right up through the generals. And it's the kind of thing where, you have to almost kind of renew that sense of democracy, or at least that's, what I hope to cultivate, among my kids and in my community and so on like this, because that's, that's the way I feel. I feel that this is something that not everybody gets a chance to do, and we're kind of, and not only that, Rick, this year, we actually get to make real choices.
Yep.
Here in Pennsylvania, it actually matters this year in the primary, and we've actually got, across the country, you've got slates of progressive candidates that have really defined the debate. I mean, especially on the Democratic side. Obviously not on the nut job woohoo side on the Republican end of things. But oh my God, when was the last time you had a Democratic election, a Democratic primary, not just here in Pennsylvania but across the country, where you had real progressive candidates that are pushing for change and that got a lot of their power coming out of social movements like Occupy, like the Fight for 15, like the Our Walmart campaign. I mean, it's really, really an impressive and amazing election year.
Yeah, the one thing I would disagree with is I think on the right wing side of things, I think they're defining themselves as well as crazy and crazier.
Oh no! I'm saying that there's no progressive choice on that end is what I mean. They are. I mean, this is the kind of thing. Like you feed, you sit there, and I think about those people. And I knew people like this, growing up and stuff, where they get like a Doberman or they get like a pit bull or they get some sort of fighting dog, and they would get that dog and they would train it to fight and they would make it go swimming like for hours on end to strengthen up their muscles. They would hang them from trees by their jaws to strengthen them up. They would tease them. They would poke at them or prod them and make it mean. And then, sure enough, it comes right back down to it. One of these days, that dog's going to get loose because it'll bite him right back.
No,
and it's like, what do you expect if you keep on poking the fire and poking the mean dog and encouraging it to be mean? That thing's going to come after you eventually, and that's what the Republicans have done.
Yeah, that's an excellent analogy, especially when you look at over the weekend. The big story was the Koch brothers are talking about sitting this race out because, or maybe even funding Hillary's campaign because the Republicans are just that far off the rails.
Absolutely, I think it's that story was really interesting in a bunch of different ways. Like, not only they're saying, look, Hillary might be a better president, like from their perspective, which you could totally see, but on the other end, there was a little bit of smoke and mirrors going on there by the Koch brothers too as well, because all the attention is shifting to the national elections. The Koch brothers are kind of like just fanning, shifting their money into statewide elections and local and kind of local think tanks and projects like this. I mean, we got the announcement like not too long ago that you got our friend over there in the Commonwealth Foundation is leaving the Commonwealth Foundation to start this brand new project, which is going to be an even harder hitting kind of think tank or organization, quote unquote nonprofit from the right, the far right. And you better believe they're getting some Koch money for that. So I think they're shifting our attention away, saying, "Yeah, look at these craziness of the national election." Meanwhile, they're up to no good, kind of right below the surface.
Because they realize, I mean, real power comes at the local level, and if they, and this is the thing that always bothers me about our election process is that people drop out in the non-presidential years. The other 3 years, they don't show up to vote. And to me, those are the ones that really affect your lives every day. And this is where the Koch brothers and their Freedom Partners and all those groups are filtering down to that level so that they can gain that control.
That's right. And this is, I mean, how many times have we said on this program, how many times have you said on this program that this is what, the left really has failed to do? It has failed to invest in its infrastructure, has failed to invest in that long term. And I was talking to, I was on this podcast earlier today. A former student of mine lives out west. He started up his own podcast. I was talking to him earlier on today, and one of the things I was saying to him is like, is that we used to understand this on the left. I mean, if you look at the Highlander School, which you've been to, right? I mean, you had Miles Horton, wrote this book about the long haul, about investing in the long haul. The idea is that you're training people, you're training activists, not because you're looking for, the win at the end of your driveway, but you're looking at building that capacity over potentially generations, right? It's the slow, steady work of organizing, and it's not the sexy stuff that you get, in presidential campaigns. But it is that kind of knowledge that's absolutely essential. It's that stuff that goes unrecognized for the most part, but, that's what we really need to be doing. And the right got this and understood this a long time ago. And this is the kind of thing that I think that we have a potential to do some of that, if frankly, from my perspective, I look if the Bernie activists, the Bernie campaign can begin making that shift towards investing in the activists that made this day possible.
Yeah, but here's the thing, and I think this is a valid complaint on the Bernie side of things, is that he's had no coattails. It doesn't seem that he's reached behind him to pull folks along. And I had a bunch of people email me about John Fetterman. Yep. Whom I've had on this program a couple of times, who endorsed, was one of the first people to endorse Bernie, and there's been no reciprocation. And one of the concerns, and maybe you'll agree or disagree, but one of the concerns is that maybe he's not going to play in the sandbox to help others if this is truly a revolution.
Well, that might be true, and that concerns me too as well. I mean, Michelle Goldberg last week, writing in Slate, was making this point. The title of it, "Member of Bernie's Army is still waiting for the candidate's help." And Bernie was just here, and where was he kind of showing up for John Fetterman? And it seemed to make sense. And I think that I've been working on this list now. I've been thinking about what happens to this campaign, and starting my list of unsolicited advice for the Bernie Sanders campaign. Right now it seems to me that the pivot that Bernie Sanders needs to make and that campaign needs to make is it needs to be kind of pivoting towards the movement. Right, because it looks like, frankly, it's like a real long shot that Bernie gets a nomination at this point. And I'm sorry to be a political realist on this. I'm voting for Bernie tomorrow. I'll be perfectly frank about that. But I'm looking towards the long haul. And if I was sitting in his campaign right now, I'd have these 3 points. It's number one, you show up for every progressive candidate that you can in their state, on their home turf, to kind of help support that moving forward. The second thing is you show up in those states that experience voting problems, that there's also irregularities like New York and Nevada and Arizona, where there was, even lawsuits in some of these places, and you push, access to the polls and access and voting rights. That's where you get on the ground and you get pushed there. And the final one is that you get a backdrop at as many locations as you can where these horrendous trade deals have wrecked communities, and use that as the backdrop of your photo op to talk about the economic policy moving forward. I mean, I think that the shift in that campaign is really got to be hard in for the policy, hard in for building that movement. And there's been signs, both among some members of these kind of quote-unquote Bernie or bust group, which I think is just an insane way to think about politics, if you ask me. But voting is not about your personal self-expression. It's about building power and capacity. And then on the other end of things, it's about, we've got to actually think for the long term so that we can win for the long term.
Excellent points. But don't you think we've been trained as a society to have that kind of polarized thinking?
Oh, absolutely. But this, not only we trained to think about that polarized thinking, we haven't even been trained in actually how to conduct ourselves effectively as democratic citizens, as political beings. Again, we used to have some of these institutions, like the labor movement was the central location for this kind of training, right? That knowledge from generation to generation about collective power. Same thing that you had institutions like the Highlander School that were invested in those kind of, capacity building. But, we've told everybody that it's about me, right? This country has systematically, and the Democrats have been, kind of holding their hat on this one and assisting along the way. People, especially during the 90s with Bill Clinton, the New Democrats, of gutting the labor movement and gutting that knowledge. Now then you have an education system, right, which doesn't even want to go near talking about how we do things collectively and collaboratively. So we've lost that knowledge as well. So, I mean, it's an uphill climb at this point. There's no doubt about it. The only thing that we can do now is to hopefully use this movement that has been to help kind of build that capacity even further. And it's good to see that there's some people that are focused on that. Not everybody, certainly. But there's enough people that I think that we have a possibility of making that step forward. And, if Hillary gets in the fall, to hold her feet to the fire as we move forward.
Yeah, I mean, I was reminded earlier of A. Philip Randolph and, the organizing that he did and the pushing of FDR towards policies that benefited African Americans and really a number of labor groups and all of that as well. And, I look back to There was an interview, and I guess it's 20 years now that it happened, where Ralph Reed, who is the head of the Christian Coalition, was asked, how did you do this? And he pulled out the Steelworkers Organizing Handbook and basically said, we did what the labor movement and what the civil rights movement did. And that's, like, as you've pointed out, all of the grassroots groundwork, the thousands of people who history is never going to remember and was never supposed to remember, who built better opportunities for their kids in the future.
That's absolutely right. And, and look at what Ralph Reed did, too, as well. He basically went into the communities. I mean, Pennsylvania is a perfect example of this. I mean, Ralph Reed, we have electricity deregulation thanks to Ralph Reed and his organization of kind of right-wing kind of organization for privatization among the churches, especially in rural PA. Right? I mean, that was on the ground. That was one of his experiments of kind of using that organizing manual and then getting into the communities and doing that grassroots work in order to kind of like pass electricity deregulation, and that's incredible. So, but we've got to get back to that kind of mentality that that's what it's about. The election is, you get all the bells and whistles, you get all the celebration, you get lots of cameras in here. When the cameras start to go away, we have to be prepared to carry that forward.
And what's left? I mean, it's interesting that you brought up, Reed and the deregulation, because I still remember the radio commercials as they were pushing it, and God was speaking to people, saying, you want electricity? What do you think this is, Pennsylvania?
Right.
And I still remember those commercials going, wow, we're invoking God to deregulate electricity. Holy wow.
Yeah, not only that, he had already laid the groundwork by the time that those commercials started rolling. So, the commercials come out and you've already got thousands of people out there nodding their heads in agreement because the groundwork has already been laid.
It's just nuts. Last question I've got for you. What are you expecting tomorrow on the statewide races? I know the Bernie and then Hillary, you said you're hoping Bernie wins. Polls not in his favor.
No.
The latest poll I saw has Hillary 55-40. But what do you see in the other races, the AG's race and the big coveted one, and who takes on Toomey in the fall?
I mean, in the AG race, I think it's going to be interesting. I mean, I think Shapiro's probably going to pull that out. Even though I know Zappala has got some significant endorsements, he's got a lot of people behind him. But he's got Shapiro has kind of built his network and he's getting the endorsements for the big Democrats, so that might be enough to get him in. I think that I'd like to see Fetterman at least kind of come away with double digits. I mean, the last poll I saw, he's down at 7% at this point. McGinty's been gaining on Sestak in the polls. I still think Sestak is going to eke that one out. And we're going to see. And frankly, at the presidential level, I do think Hillary's going to take it. I mean, the best showing right now in the polls for Sanders is one that came out from CBS, I believe, which showed him at 8% behind, but most other ones have him in double-digit behind. So I think Sanders is going to make a really, really strong showing, but I think he's going to come up short. Hopefully, it'll be a single-digit, but you never know. I mean, the polls have been off before. There's been some great organizing that's been going on. The rallies have been hugely attended, but as we know, it's a closed primary. It's not like you've got a lot of independents to move, and if people had signed up in time, they switched their party registration over to Democrat early enough, maybe we'll see that push to get Bernie over the hump. But it's going to be an uphill climb.
It'll be interesting on the AG's race. That's the interesting one for me.
Yeah,
because I think the better AG to actually do the job would be Zappala, but that's as high as he would go. I think Shapiro, that's a stepping stone to being governor.
I agree, and I think that could actually be a benefit for him and moving forward. And frankly, on your show the other day, Shapiro actually said that he would actually kind of start going after the education issue, going after Republicans for not living up to the constitutional right for an education in this state. And I had never heard that come out of the mouth of an AG candidate before.
Yeah, and to me, that's one of those things where you go, wow, let's see you do it.
Yeah, no.
And now that I've got it on tape, I'm going to hold you to it.
That's exactly right. And the fact that you got that person making that pledge live on the air, I certainly heard it, and now we've got it. We can kind of push that out, and that's something that we can use to push him even further. Yeah. And I think that frankly, this is how I think about it: is because of his political aspirations, that might be just something that he'd be willing to do.
I'm with you. So it'll be interesting to see how tomorrow plays out. But at the end of the day, no matter where you are, you got to get to the polls. You got to vote tomorrow. That's
vote.
All righty. Kevin, I appreciate the time, man.
All right, Rick, we'll talk to you soon.
Always great talking to Kevin Mahoney, editor Zero, Raging Chicken Press. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Wow, $5 billion. That's the stunning amount that Goldman Sachs has agreed to pay to settle federal criminal charges over its shameful financial scams that helped wreck America's economy in 2008. That's a lot of gold, even for Goldman. Yet, the Wall Street powerhouse says it's, quote, pleased to swallow this sour slug of medicine. Is that because its executives are contrite? Oh, come on. Banksters don't do contrite. Rather, they are pleased with the settlement because, thanks to backroom dealing with friendly prosecutors, it's riddled with special loopholes that could eliminate nearly $2 billion from the publicized punishment. For example, the deal calls for the felonious bank to put $250 million into affordable housing, but generous federal negotiators put incentives and credits in the fine print that will let Goldman escape with paying out less than a third of that. Also, about $2.5 billion of the settlement is to be paid to consumers hurt by the financial crisis. But the deal lets the banks deduct almost $1 billion of this payout from its corporate tax, meaning you and I will subsidize Goldman's payment. As a bank reform advocate puts it, the problem with these settlements is that they are carefully crafted more to conceal than to reveal to the American public what really happened here. This is Jim Hightower saying, one more reason Wall Street bankers privately wink and grin at these seemingly huge punishments is that even paying the full $5 billion would only be relatively painful. To you and me, that sounds like a crushing number. But Goldman Sachs raked in $33 billion in revenue last year alone, so it's a reasonable cost of doing business. After all, Goldman sold tens of billions of dollars in the fraudulent investment packages leading to the settlement. So the bottom line is that crime can actually pay if it's big enough.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
Had an interesting time back the last couple of days in my hometown of Cleveland. It's one of those times where with my grandmother being ill and on her deathbed, and relatives who you haven't seen in probably 20 years coming by to try and talk and say their last couple of words, whatever they can get. It then turns into other conversations, and I didn't realize just how far out some of my family members are politically. Because when I lived there, you really didn't have those kind of conversations, but now, wow. Not happy about a lot of things, but one of the topics of conversation that popped up, and I actually had one of my relatives, and I hate to say that I'm related to someone like this, but I actually had a relative tell me that evidently the Treasury Department made an exception just to get a black person on money to put a non-president on the money. And I go, you're right. I don't think President Alexander Hamilton would have liked that at all. And I know President Benjamin Franklin would have preferred to have a kite instead of a black woman. I'm certain of it. But even more, the first woman president, President Susan B. Anthony, she would have not liked it either. And who could forget President Sacagawea? She was on the dollar gold coin, so she, obviously president, right? And he stood there and kind of was like, I'm kind of dumb. And I'm going, those are those dumb things that people regurgitate without actually thinking. I go, you saw that in an email, didn't you? And he goes, yeah. I go, you do realize that when they send out those emails, They're trying to get in between your ears so that you'll regurgitate it without actually thinking. How about putting a filter between your brain and your mouth so that when you say something, you go, I actually thought about that. Because, and look, I haven't even thought of all of the other money. That's just kind of what popped onto my head at that moment. You go, maybe just stop and think about, the sanity. And what's interesting is the right wing is losing their freaking mind over Harriet Tubman on the 20. And the couple of women that they're going to put on the other image that they're going to use on the back of the 5s, losing their marbles. And to be honest, one of the things I'm really kind of enjoying. Do you remember a couple of years ago when the conservatives were really pushing to get Ronald Reagan put on the dime? Kicking FDR off and putting Reagan's mug on there. There's nobody talking about Reagan on any money. I find that very interesting, and I think it's good that we're going to put somebody else on the money. Now, here's the sorry part in my view. She's going to be put on the money. Harriet Tubman. We put on the 20 right around the same time that we're going to stop using money because they're moving everything to digital currency. That's the sad part about it. The upside is for the next couple of years, you're going to have a lot of history projects and a lot of papers being written on folks that, well, history deliberately forgot, thanks to the state of Texas. Just my thought. Anyway, going to take a quick break. When we come back to talk about education, what's going on, where we should be going. Diane Ravitch after this. Stick around. Listen to the Rick Smith Show. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to thericksmithshow.com. If you've missed any portion of the program, you can download the podcast at thericksmithshow.com.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham. UPS and the Independent Pilots Association are presenting final bargaining positions this week as federal mediation comes to an end. The pilots union is preparing for a strike after 5 years of trying to negotiate a new labor agreement with UPS. Pilots union spokesman Brian Godet lays out the issues that are important to UPS pilots.
The number one goal of this contract is improving safety, and the way that we want to improve safety is by better schedules. Fatigue is a huge issue for the pilots at UPS. The FAA has instituted new flight and duty rules for passenger pilots, but unfortunately cargo pilots were carved out of that. So improving our schedules, better safety, mitigating fatigue is basically job one.
Godet says that pilots have opened a new strategic strike center in Louisville, Kentucky to better coordinate strike action if needed, but the pilots are hoping they can come to an agreement with UPS without a strike. Godet says that the pilots are overdue for improvements at UPS.
We want improved wages. We haven't seen a pay raise since January 1 of 2012. We want to improve pensions. The average pilot now is in his or her early 50s, so they're starting to pay attention to that. And obviously, like everyone else, we want to keep an eye on health care.
This is Mitch Lawrence with the Sports Minute for Workers Independent News. Well, first, Bruce Springsteen canceled a concert in North Carolina to protest that state passing anti-discrimination protection for the LGBT community. I know another boss with an equally powerful voice is also speaking up. The boss we're talking about is the commissioner of the National Basketball Association, Adam Silver, who is moving toward taking next year's All-Star game in Charlotte and moving it elsewhere because of North Carolina's so-called transgender bathroom law. This would be a major blow to the Charlotte economy, which would stand to lose $100 million in revenue if the NBA pulls out of the home of the Hornets. Silver knows something about North Carolina, spending his college days at Duke University. These days, he's also a member of the Duke Board of Trustees. He usually makes the right calls on these kind of issues. Remember, it was only 2 years ago when, relatively new to his position, he ousted longtime Los Angeles Clippers owner Donald Sterling after he was found to have made racist comments about Magic Johnson and other African-American people. Although the league should have acted sooner to force Sterling to sell the team, Silver's move to impose a lifetime ban was universally hailed. Now he'll no doubt have the backing of his 30 owners, including Charlotte owner Michael Jordan, if there is no change in North Carolina's law. The NBA has always had a track record of being the most progressive of all major sports leagues. Leaving Charlotte is the right thing to do. Adam Silver knows it, and he will act on it accordingly.
Brought to you by the IBEW, 750,000 men and women powering the way for an American comeback. Information on how to become an International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Power Professional is online at ibew.org.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Yes, it is all about the children, even after they're born. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. We're working on getting Diane Ravitch on the line to talk about the Network for Public Education conference they had. I guess it was last weekend, not this past weekend, but the weekend before in Raleigh, North Carolina. To me, one of the interesting questions is, why did you continue to have it after the insanity going on there in Raleigh? So we're going to work on that and see where it takes us. Did you see this over the weekend? Warren Buffett came out and said that he's not in favor of raising the minimum wage. And he made an argument that I've been making for years, in that maybe you go, okay, maybe we can't raise the minimum wage, but maybe we should be doing something else. And he says, look, leave the minimum wage alone, maybe bump it a little bit. He says, look, $15 an hour. He believes a $15 an hour minimum wage would reduce employment in his words, in a major way. Crushing many workers who possess only basic skills. What his suggestion is, and I've been saying this for a while, and I've been talking about guaranteed minimum incomes for a very long time, because, as we mechanize, as we continue to allow the wealth of this country to be absorbed upward because of technology and organization and all of that stuff, as you create a billionaire who comes up with a single app that employs nobody, you've got to figure out how people can then consume what is being made. So to me, the idea of a guaranteed minimum income, something that seems rational. And, tie it to some sort of community service work, tie it to whatever you have to, but make sure that everyone has at least a baseline lifestyle. But what Warren Buffett's saying is we need to expand the earned income tax credit, which right now, you hear the Mitt Romney's, if you remember Mitt Romney's statement, 47% of the people, they don't pay any federal taxes. That's because 47% of the people benefit from the earned income tax credit. And there are a lot of people, many whom you would not even imagine, who get it because their income isn't sufficient to pay federal taxes. And in a lot of cases, that 47%, a lot of them get money back, a little extra money, so that they can consume in the economy. We're already doing this. And you go, that's socialism. That's horrible. That's just terrible. It's bad. We shouldn't be giving those lazy, no good for nothing money. What's wrong with you? Until you find out that it was the sainted Ronald Reagan who passed it through, because it was Uncle Milton Friedman's idea, kind of his idea. If you remember the idea of a negative tax, which was a kind of a guaranteed minimum income idea, we've used the tax code to say, okay, the people at the very bottom, we're going to subsidize a little bit, so that they can take those low-wage jobs and still participate in the economy. It's not benevolence on their part. Understand, they don't care whether you live, breathe, die, eat, whatever. They don't care about that. What they want is you participating in the economy so that you can go to the store and pay for sugar and shoes and whatever, that you can consume things that the quote-unquote producers are producing. If you've got a society of people with no money, it doesn't matter how good your product, it doesn't matter how good you are doing at what you're doing, people can't buy it. It seems rational. And this is an area where the business community, who needs customers, and the poverty community, who needs resources to become customers, could probably come together. Seems like a situation that you go, we could probably do that. Because as one of my very wealthy uncles explains to me, that we could take all the money from the rich people and give it all back to the poor people, and we'd get it all back again. And I'd say, okay, let's give that a try. Let's do that, because it generates activity, gets people working, gets people making money, gets kids being able to eat, gets kids with shoes. Seems rational, sane, reasonable, doesn't it, on a certain level? And by tying it to the earned income tax credit, this should make the conservatives all tingly in the panties, because there's a mandatory work requirement. In order to qualify for it, you've had to pay in some taxes. You had to pay something in. You had to have a job that paid federal taxes. Now, understand, if you paid like $500 in federal taxes, you'll probably get $3,000 or $4,000 back. But for a moment, you paid taxes. And we used to, and again, this is one of those things that Mitt Romney brought up and just kind of, got the crazy people all riled up about without thinking that, duh, it's probably you. We used to think that this was a good idea. And I still do. And this is why I constantly say we can raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour so that people can have a reasonable living. I do believe it will cost some people their jobs, and it will be a transition. I believe that. Or we make sure that people have a lifestyle up to $15 an hour by subsidizing it. And in the process, if we're going to subsidize low-wage employment, maybe we should not beat them up and demonize and do what we've seen over the last several election cycles, which is point fingers at them. To me, that just seems sane and rational. But we have to pick one. We can't do a Band-Aid of both, because right now, and I remember saying this when the conversation, when President Obama said $9 and then $9.50, and then there was a call for $10.10, and as we were justifying how high to go, I kept saying, look, anything less than $10, $11 is nothing. It's not an increase, because most people who make minimum wage get subsidies that would take them up to the $10, $11 range. So it's got to be something better than $11. I was on the 12 when it came out, and then when Fight for 15 happened, I'm going, absolutely, that's the way to go, because it's going to make people's lives better. The workers their lives are going to get better. They're going to have more money in their pocket. They're going to spend it. It's going to be better for the economy. Good thing. I still think having more money in workers' pockets is a good thing. The question is, how do you put it there? Do you have substantial subsidy programs? I'm in favor of that, but pick one and then don't demonize. I mean, I think that's the important slice in all of this. And you don't demonize people for using those programs. They're there as part of our society and how we keep business, keep them moving, keep them producing, keep them profitable, and still make people's lives better. That seems reasonable, seems rational. So when I listen to someone like Buffett who's saying, look, this is a good idea. It's a better solution because it's about more than just money. It's a better solution because it provides work incentive, and it provides people the ability to improve their skills. And there's so much more to then, here's just a check. He says, look, by doing this, we're not distorting the quote unquote free market. You're not going to have a policy that's going to limit employment. And for a short period of time, $15 an hour will have some effect. And I've talked to economists who said there'll be some of it, but it's not going to be massive like everyone says. As Buffett is pointing out, there might be some distortions in the market, but this earned income tax credit going this route doesn't do that. And in fact, maximizes employment. If you could get employees and you only had to pay them $8 or $9 or $10 an hour, and they were still having the lifestyle of someone living at $15 an hour, that they didn't have to work 2 or 3 jobs, they didn't have to fuss over childcare and all of the other things, you would have more employment. It's that simple. Seems reasonable, seems rational. Instead of what's going on is you've got these Republicans who are just pointing their finger and saying, oh, these are all cheaters. As a society, I think we've got to come to the rationale that, look, they're mechanizing everything they can. I can't tell you how many conversations I've had with people who go, if they raise the minimum wage $15 an hour, the fast food industry, they're going to just mechanize everything. And I said, yeah, but even if you leave it at $7.25, they're still going to mechanize things, because $7.25 is more than zero. And we've been subsidizing the mechanization of our jobs for quite some time. Anytime a company improves, buys new infrastructure, buys new machines, they get to write it off on their taxes. We're already subsidizing the replacement of jobs now. Why do you think raising the minimum wage would hurt that any faster? Companies are doing it at an alarming pace already. And look, I'm not a Luddite. On some level, I do believe we move towards bettering our technology and making our lives better. But that's the key to it. I don't engage in the technological things that don't make our lives better. I'll give you an example. When I go to the supermarket, I don't use the self-checkout because what they've done is they've got into a situation where they expect everyone to use the self-checkout. I go to the line and then I complain to the manager that the line's too long. And he goes, well, you should have used the machine. I go, you going to pay me? And then I say, well, if that's the case, I'll just go to another supermarket, which is what I've done. When we go to restaurants, they got these little things on the table that they want you to order from the little thing and pay you right there at the little thing. Makes life convenient, doesn't it? Yeah, but it puts the waitress out of work or the waiter out of work. Who's going to do those jobs? The reality is, and this is one of those things that's kind of frustrating to me, until we wake up as a society and say, how do we all do better together instead of just hooray for me and the heck with everyone else? Until we get in that mindset, we're going to continue to have mass inequality where a handful do wildly well and the rest of us are going to be pitted against one another like we're seeing right now. And you'll see the rise of the Trump-type characters. Do you really think Trump is the guy who's going to bring prosperity back to this country? Do you think he cares about workers? I mean, really, honestly and truthfully, do you think he cares? I saw a thing the other day that says if he doesn't win, and this is one of those, please be true. Evidently, he said that if he doesn't win, you're never going to see him again. He's going to go play golf somewhere, or he's going to disappear. And I'm going, really? Please? Can you take Cruz and Kasich with you? I'll tell you what, at some point, we've got to have these adult conversations. And to me, guaranteed minimum income, one of them. So I'm glad to see Warren Buffett at least, bringing it up. Well worth the discussion. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Give them the talk. I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1969. The governor of South Carolina sent 1,000 state troopers and National Guardsmen to Charleston, South Carolina. They were sent there to deal with the striking hospital workers who wanted union recognition. The strike had started on March 19th at the Medical College Hospital. A little over a week later, more than 60 black workers from the Charleston County Hospital joined the strike in solidarity. The governor was determined to use every tactic at his disposal to break the strike. He worried that if the strikers were successful, unionization efforts would spread throughout the other sectors of state employees. During the strike, a hotel room of one of the union organizers was bombed by an unknown assailant. Soldiers with bayonets marched through the streets of Charleston. Hundreds of picketers were arrested, including teenagers who had joined the protest. The governor had gone as far as imposing a 9 p.m. curfew on people to keep them off the streets. But the workers were determined to win their rights. The United Auto Workers sent $10,000 to support the striking workers. Civil rights leaders from across the nation came to South Carolina to support the workers. Andrew Young and Ralph Abernathy of the Southern Christian Leadership Conference were among those who were arrested. Coretta Scott King, the widow of Dr. King, gave a speech saying, "Hospital workers have been working full-time jobs at part-time pay. After all, $1.30 an hour is not a wage, it is an insult. I also have another interest in being here," she said, and that is many of the hospital workers throughout our nation are women, black women. Many of them are the main supporters of their families. The hospital workers were able to win a grievance process and modest pay increase. Although they did not win union recognition, they inspired hospital workers across the country. Labor History in 2 brought to you by the Illinois Labor History Society and The Rick Smith Show. For more information, go to laborhistoryin2.com.
This is the Media Matters Minute. I'm Stephanie Salomon. Republican-controlled state legislatures across the country are introducing and passing so-called bathroom bills targeting the transgender community. Listen to Media Matters' Carlos Massa and ACLU attorney Chase Strangio discuss the bathroom predator myth behind these bills.
Proponents of these laws claim they're needed to stop sexual predators from dressing up as women and sneaking into women's restrooms by pretending to be transgender.
We're concerned about the safety of the women. We're concerned about the safety of the young girls.
What they are doing is participating in a falsehood that allows trans people to be associated with intrusions into privacy, with violence, and with harm to other people.
A Media Matters study has found 0 proven incidents in the more than 17 states and 200 cities where transgender people are currently protected from discrimination and allowed to use public bathrooms that correspond with their gender identity. For their full conversation on the bathroom predator myth, please visit MediaMatters.org.
Chances are, when you took a shower this morning, an AFSCME member made sure that water was clean. When you drove to work, an AFSCME member maintained the road. When you rode an elevator, an AFSCME member inspected it. I'm David Philman, Executive Director of AFSCME Council 13, the American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees. AFSCME members enforce regulations, keep prisoners behind bars, take care of patients, protect the environment, and more. The work isn't glamorous, the salaries aren't high, but AFSCME members serve the public in every aspect of our daily lives. Chances are, you'll never see that AFSCME member working in a sewage plant, diving underwater to repair a bridge, or answering a 911 call. But aren't you glad they do? For more information, visit AFSCME13.org. We are AFSCME. We make Pennsylvania happy!
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out the website, thericksmithshow.com. So last week at the end of the week, and I got to tell you, I was thrilled as can be, and I'm glad that Kevin Mahoney brought it up, that Josh Shapiro, who's running for Attorney General here in Pennsylvania, said, you know what, I'm going to, as Attorney General, go after the Republicans in the state for not having a fair formula, for not funding education equally across the Commonwealth, and really doing what I've been asking for and saying for a very long time, is use our Constitution and the words a thorough and efficient public education as the basis for a lawsuit. So I got to tell you, I was thrilled to hear that. Now, I'm not trying to influence tomorrow's vote, but it's something I think worthy of consideration. And here to talk a little bit about education and funding being part of it, I've asked Julian Vasquez-Helig to come talk with us. He is a board member of the Network for Public Education. He's also the professor of educational leadership and policy studies, as well as the director of the Doctorate in Educational Leadership at California State University, Sacramento. Julian, thanks for taking time for us.
Thanks, Rick. So glad to be back on your show.
I appreciate it. I look at what our hopefully maybe an attorney general here in Pennsylvania had to say as a candidate, that he would go after a lawsuit to fund education fairly. And I guess you could debate what fairly is, but I think that's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, the thing about this, we have these school finance cases on a state-by-state basis because in the Rodriguez Supreme Court case, the Supreme Court said that the federal government didn't have a role in ensuring this equality. So state by state, we fought this battle, and it's an ongoing battle. We find ourselves in courts in Pennsylvania and Texas, California, and many other states because politicians are really determined to offer students a cheap education. Notice that's not efficient, but an inexpensive and cheap education. But the thing is that, working class and lower class low SES students are the ones that are actually getting the short end of the stick because the wealthy are able to throw money at education. You'll see their kids in Montessori, and you'll see, the lacrosse fields and the beautiful, football fields. But what we're really talking about is on the other side of the tracks, the other side of the highway, that low-income and middle-income families are the ones that are receiving a rationed education.
And I think that's the perfect word, rationed. Because, when the charter school thing came out, and I remember 20 years ago when they were talking about pushing charter schools, that's what they led us to believe, that our kids would have the opportunity to go to Montessori schools. We're going to use public dollars and make public schools that were different, and we'd all try different things, and it was going to be fabulous. What it's turned into, in my opinion, and you can agree or disagree, is it's about the money now.
Sure. No, I'd agree with you. In Washington State, they recently had a case and charters were deemed unconstitutional under the Constitution in that state because they weren't considered common schools. And the reason why is because what a lot of people don't realize is that charter schools are public schools, and they like to say that, but privately operated. And what that means is that the people who operate charter schools have private control of tax dollars. There's no democratic accountability for that money. And most research out there, I'm a professor, I'm a researcher, I'm a data guy. Most of the research out there on charter schools shows that they don't perform any better than traditional public schools. So it's a really big ruse, I think, being played on the public, because when you hear the word charter school, you think positive thoughts. It's almost as if we're sprinkling magical fairy dust. But most of the research on charter schools show that they don't perform any better. The most prominent study out of Credo in 2009, probably their most famous study, shows that 85% of charter schools don't perform any better than traditional public schools. So really, it's a sleight of hand on the part of folks that really want to control your tax dollars and not do a better job. So we already have a messed up system. So why do we want a system that's even worse than the system we already have?
No, I agree with you, but that's an excellent way of putting it. It's a sleight of hand. It's a 3-card monte, just without having the queen in the deck. And what's frustrating to me is you're right. We're trained to believe, especially in minority communities, that those are going to be better. Because what could be worse than some of the schools that I've seen that have crumbling roofs, and as the one woman from Detroit told me that she's got rats running through her classroom. What could be worse than that?
Yeah, well, there's no doubt that the situation in our public schools is dire, especially in rural areas and many urban areas. It's because legislatures, whether it be in Pennsylvania and other places, have decided to underfund those schools so that they can't properly provision education. And so there's no doubt about that. That's a real serious issue. But we also know that with charter schools, there's a decade of research that shows that charter schools are actually more segregated, that they actually have a variety of ways that they limit access. And what happens with charter schools is that schools choose. So school choice is exactly that. Because what charter schools can do, since they're privately operated, is they determine the rules of the game and who can attend those schools, who has access to those schools, and who stays at those schools.
Right.
Because they're not democratically controlled.
But
if
Julian,
you're angry with something that your local school board does, in the next election you can go down to the ballot box and vote them out. But with charter schools, you have no control over what they do or the decisions that they make or how they spend their money or how they self-deal.
Yeah, but Julian, I hear my charter school supporter friends, tell me it's a lottery. I mean, I saw the movie where the little girl's crying and the bingo balls. It was great. These kids won the lottery. They got the golden ball and they were going to have a future. And it's fabulous, right?
Yeah, of course. Well, you're talking about the film Waiting for Superman, which was a very, very long infomercial on behalf of charter schools, including the kids' charter schools. But the issue with that is yes, it is true that you enter a lottery, but there are also rules by which you can enter the lottery. In many states, charter schools decide who's eligible for that lottery and what the footprint of their charter school is. So, for example,
Good point.
I saw a KIPP board showing which neighborhoods would be eligible for a particular lottery. So the charter schools are choosing who's eligible in many places. And then, so that's just the entry point. But then once you get to the school, many charter schools have codes of conduct. Some charter schools require a certain number of hours for parents to volunteer for the kids to remain in the school. In California, for example, parents would have to pay money if they weren't able to complete those volunteer hours, which was actually against the law here. So there's a lot of ways, and Kevin Wellner has a really interesting piece. It's called The Dirty Dozen, a dozen ways that charter schools choose instead of students and families choosing.
But what do you say, Julian, to I've had conversations with some folks who have said, we should be able to choose our schools, and that what seems to be resegregation is actually in the benefit of some minority students. And this is one of those frustrating moments because we fought for desegregated schools, and it seems like almost voluntarily a lot of minority communities are moving towards that's what they want.
Well, the challenge is that legislators have failed to deliver what parents want. If you look at national surveys of what parents want in their schools, they want less testing, they want higher quality teachers, they want more extracurriculars, they want smaller class sizes. Those are the things, if you look at these national surveys of what parents want to choose from, that's what they want to choose. But unfortunately, each of those things that I just talked about come with a price tag. Smaller class sizes are expensive. Teachers who are certified are also expensive. Extracurriculars, also expensive. The things that parents want to choose from, we haven't provided them in their schools. So, of course, they want a choice. They want safety in schools and these sorts of things. So, yes, of course, everyone wants to choose. But the problem with market solutions to problems is that in markets there's winners and losers. So when you go into your local grocery store and you want to buy a pizza, there's pizzas of all these different prices. Some people can afford the $25 pizza, and some people can only afford the $3. And that's what markets do. They segment the population. There's winners and losers. That's what's happened in New Orleans. The latest research by Linda Darling-Hammond shows is what they did in New Orleans is they created a segmentation of school quality. So yes, a few kids do have the opportunity to go to a top-level school in New Orleans, but the rest of the students in New Orleans are going to C, D, and F schools, which is no different than the situation that they had before. Essentially what they did was they created a market tiering of schools, which inevitably means there's winners and losers. So of course, and I'm also the education chair for the NAACP for the state of California. So of course at our convention there's folks going around talking about how charters and vouchers are great because they're considered that talented tenth. There is a small proportion of students that do gain access in these market mechanisms. But the problem is that over time, there's many, many losers, and the situation doesn't really change all that much for communities of color.
Yeah, so let me ask you this. You guys just had your conference in Raleigh, North Carolina, the Network for Public Education conference there. And I'm sure these are issues that you've talked about. The first question on that is, why did you choose to stay in North Carolina after a lot of people have bailed on doing anything in North Carolina? Why'd you choose to stay?
Right. Well, the challenge with North Carolina is that, they were a shining beacon of education until about 2010 when the Tea Party took over the legislature. Folks would talk about North Carolina's exemplary teacher quality. They were focused on national board teachers. They were one of the states that had these national board teachers and which are expert teachers that go through a very rigorous process. They had the North Carolina Teaching Fellows Program. They had desegregation plans in their county-wide districts where they sought to have students of different kinds, whether they be SES or race ethnicity, go to school together. Well, in 2010, the legislature came in and deconstructed all of that progress. So if it ain't broke, fix it, I think is the approach of the Tea Partiers in North Carolina. And now North Carolina's in a spiral. Districts like Houston are in North Carolina trying to recruit their teachers to come to Texas because the high-quality teachers are emptying out of that state. And then, of course, we have the bathroom police, which was the most recent controversy in North Carolina related to this whole snafu regarding which bathroom folks can use. But we went to North Carolina to shine a light on the challenges and the issues related to education in that state. And the fact that North Carolina was a shining beacon, and now they've let corporate reformers and private control really overtake their education policy. And now they're one of the states that, in our recent report card, received an F for education.
Wow. It's amazing to me. And on the bathroom police thing, it's just nuts. I actually had somebody say, do you want some burly 300-pound guy in a dress going to the bathroom next to your daughter? And I'm going, that's not quite what happens.
Yeah. Well, I was in a restaurant in Washington, D.C. recently, and they just put unisex on the door.
Yeah.
And I was like, that's a pretty easy solution there. Just make the bathrooms unisex. I don't see why it's so controversial. The problem is, I think, Reverend Barber was our keynote speaker. And one of the things he talked about is that this whole bathroom conversation is a sidetrack from the real issues facing our country. The fact that we are second only to Chile in the amount of inequality amongst developed countries. So they really want folks to vote against their self-interest.
Yep.
And so because they want the middle class and union folks and lower class folks to vote against their own self-interest in this upcoming election, they're talking about all this crazy stuff, including bathrooms and Donald Trump having conversations about his private parts and debates. You know, I remember when Al Gore sighed during a debate, we talked for a week or two about how unpresidential a sigh was. But yet, on the Republican side in this election, there's all of these antics that are going on that I think they're trying to sidetrack us from the real conversations that are happening on the other side of the aisle from Bernie and Hillary about the fact that our country needs to think very carefully about what opportunities we can offer folks of less means.
No, you're absolutely right. It's the shiny thing. Hey, look over here, stupid, while we're robbing you blind. You are absolutely right on this. So last question I've got for you. You had your conference. And folks I've talked to say it was about recharging. It was about, looking towards the future. What's the marching order coming out of this for education? What are you guys planning coming out of this conference?
Well, the Network for Public Education really seeks to network all the different parents and community folks from across the United States. We run on a shoestring budget. You know you're on the right team when your budget is in the thousands of dollars instead of in the millions. So the people on the other side of this conversation, the Education Post, the 74, the Koch Brothers Libre Initiative, all of these folks have millions and millions of dollars behind them to spin a message of private control and privatization. And so we're the good guys. You're on the right side when your budget looks like it looks. But we're working really hard to connect all of these different groups across the United States and bring these conversations to legislators on the C4 side. We endorse various politicians running for office that believe in community-based reform, democratically controlled reform, instead of this top-down privatization and private control, charters, vouchers, high-stakes testing, all of those things. And so we're working really hard to create a movement and connect communities across the United States to press for these community-based, democratically controlled approaches to education reform instead of this top-down decade that we've had inspired by Democrats and Republicans alike.
Yeah, good point. My grandfather always said if a rich guy's going to take a buck out of his pocket to tell you don't need something, you better spend two to get it because they understand return on investment. So when I see these millionaire groups and these billionaires spending all of this money, I keep asking, what's in it for them? And what's in it is, wild riches beyond our imagination on the backs of our kids' dreams. It's that simple.
Right.
Julian,
education is a $1 trillion enterprise in the United States. So
huge money. Julian, I appreciate you taking a little time for us. Thanks for filling us in. Great talking to you again.
Have a good day.
Thanks so much. Let's take a quick break. Right back after this. Stick around. You're listening to The Rick Smith Show. We're working people. Come to talk.
Creeping through the door. It's desperate times, so desperate measures we explore. Marching on the Capitol to lobby leaders for involvement. 3,000 people screaming out, "Where's our government?" Lawsuits and arraignments, members under company surveillance. Public divided, either they love us or they hate us. Profit billions off our back, and it's still not enough. They should have took into account that we never give up. We'll be here one day longer. One day longer. The people's voice is stronger. The people's voice is stronger. We work hard for our money. We work hard for respect. Keep fighting for these rights for generations. It's next. One day longer. One day longer. The people's
Your working class radio experience, where hard work, common sense, and rational thought are a reality. The Rick Smith Show.
So many things went so terribly wrong and tragically wrong in Flint.
Criminal charges for officials in Flint water crisis.
We're still suffering from the BP disaster.
Louisiana residents protest new offshore drilling on anniversary of BP oil spill. Deadly oil facility explosion kills 3 in Mexico. Plus,
Harris points in one direction, but that is only a blueprint.
This Earth Day, world leaders gather to sign the historic Paris Agreement to fight climate change.
All of that history and more straight ahead. From BradBlog.com, I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
Stand by for 6 minutes of independent green news, politics, analysis, and snarky comment.
You know, I'm looking forward to the day when it's renewable energy running politics. But imagine the day where mobsters are like, "You take care of me,
I'll make sure you got a nice set of solar panels on your roof come spring. Capiche?
Capito, this is your Green News Report.
Renewable energy.
Okay, Desi Doyen, I know you got a lot to get to today, but I want to welcome our newest affiliate partner. Very excited about this. WGRN 94.1 in Columbus, Ohio. And not only are they WGRN, they are the Green Renaissance Network.
Oh, yay! I like them already.
I thought you might. All right, what do you got for us today?
Well, first, criminal charges in the Flint water crisis. At a press conference on Wednesday, Michigan Attorney General Bill Schuette charged 3 officials, 2 state environment officials and 1 city water official, on 18 felony and misdemeanor counts.
They failed. They failed in their responsibilities to protect the health and safety of families of Flint. They failed Michigan families. Indeed, they failed us all, and I don't care where you live.
The 3 were charged with misconduct in office, misleading federal officials, and conspiracy to tamper with evidence, including falsifying testing documents. Michigan officials denied there was a problem with Flint's water for nearly 2 years after a state-appointed emergency manager switched the city's water system to a new source to save money.
And the Attorney General has promised there will be more charges against other officials as well.
Yeah, he said he practically guaranteed it. Meanwhile, Flint's water is still unsafe. Wednesday marked 6 years since the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico, when an explosion aboard the Deepwater Horizon offshore drilling rig killed 11 men and caused one of the worst oil spills in world history. The Obama administration this week issued the latest 5-year plan, opening up new areas for offshore drilling in the Gulf with new standards for blowout preventers, a crucial piece of equipment that failed 6 years ago. Residents of the Gulf, however, are demanding no more drilling on their vulnerable coastline.
We're still suffering from the BP disaster. We still have oil that comes in. We lose about a football field an hour of land here in Louisiana, and a lot of that has to do with the oil industry. If we continue to invest in this long-term plan that keeps us locked to an infrastructure that poisons our people, steals our democracy, and causes long-term damage to our ecosystem.
Wildlife in the Gulf still suffers. On Tuesday, NOAA scientists found exposure to BP's oil was the likely reason behind a mass die-off of baby dolphins in the Gulf. In Mexico, at least 3 people are confirmed dead, dozens injured, and hundreds evacuated after a large explosion at an oil processing facility in the state of Veracruz, owned by a subsidiary of Pemex, the state-owned oil company. It's the latest in a series of deadly explosions at Pemex facilities in recent years, but in a statement, Pemex assured that oil exports would not be affected.
Oh, good.
Meanwhile, more than half the U.S. population lives amid dangerous air pollution, warns the American Lung Association in its annual report, The State of the Air. 160 million Americans, more than half the nation, breathes dangerously polluted air, and nearly all of that air pollution comes from burning fossil fuels. Finally, Friday, April 22nd, is the 46th annual Earth Day. Earth Day 2016 is special. Leaders of at least 150 nations meet at the United Nations headquarters in New York to sign the landmark Paris Agreement, the historic international emissions pact reached in December, in which nations agreed to limit global temperatures from rising more than 2 degrees Celsius or 1.5 degrees Celsius, if at all possible. UN Climate Chief Christiana Figueres, at a speech in London, said as difficult as it was to get 195 nations to agree unanimously on anything, that was the easy part.
Now we come to the difficult part, because now we have to be intentional about everything that we do, about every investment that we do, about everything in our daily lives. We need to be intentional about the choice that we're making. The choice needs to be made, it needs to be intentional, and above all, it needs to be urgent.
The agreement goes into effect once 55 countries representing 55% of global emissions join and ratify it. The U.S. and China, representing 40% of global emissions, are on board.
And they're all expected to sign on Earth Day this
year?
Yes. Well, that is very good news for Earth Day indeed, although, as we say around here at the Green News Report,
every day is Earth Day.
Exactly. For much more on all of these stories and the ones we couldn't get to, check out our website at greennews.bradblog.com. Find us and follow us on the Facebooks and the Twitters at Green News Report. I'm Brad Friedman.
And I'm Desi Doyen.
And this has been your Green News Report.
It's a beautiful day.
the most important issues of the day. This is The Rick Smith Show.
Well, leave it to some cretin from Corryville, Pennsylvania, down near Lancaster. This idiot decided it'd be a good idea to go into the girls' bathroom and take pictures of a 10-year-old girl in the bathroom. Yeah, nice job, genius. Now what's going on is all of the right wing is going, see, if you allow that, see? No, the guy's a cretin. And hopefully someone deals with that. This is the kind of insanity that drives me crazy. This guy, pedophile. My view, you do something with that. You get caught taking pictures of a 10-year-old girl in the bathroom, I think beating's probably the right direction. Just my thought. Has nothing to do with the transgender issue. Has everything to do with the guy being a cretin. Just my thought. Anyway, let's find out what's going on around the world and in Washington, D.C. Lori Lewis, Talk Media News Service. Lori, thanks for taking time for us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So what's going on in the world? I understand we're sending troops into Syria. What's up with that?
Yeah, so we haven't sent them yet, but the president authorized 250 additional troops to be sent into Syria. As you and your listeners know, the U.S. is engaged in what the administration has officially dubbed as a war against the so-called Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. So right now we have 50 special operators in Syria, and the president said, you know, those operators are doing the job that we thought they could do, and we could up that commitment such that they'd keep improving the fight.
Right. So we're at war, are we? I
must
have missed the call.
This was a word that initially it seemed like the administration was hesitant to use, but eventually came around to.
Yeah, I think I'd be hesitant to that because I got to be honest. When I think of being at war, I think of sacrifice, and I think of us being called to action, and as a nation coming together and fighting. And we're sending 250 people to Syria.
Yeah, and you can point to just that also, and remember that the 50 that are in Syria right now are special operations forces, right. And part of this 250 that will now head to Syria will also be special operations forces, and their battle doesn't need to be as transparent as other troops does. So part of this is also like, well, the public might not be aware of what's going on because it's such a small portion of the population, but part of it's also that because we're using more and more special operators, the DOD isn't as transparent, and so the public's not as aware of what's actually happening.
So let me ask you the stupid question that comes after that. Why are we talking about it?
Why are we talking about it?
Yeah, I mean,
we're talking about it because our government is involved in a war in the Middle East, and we still are, and that still matters. We still have troops in Afghanistan. We still have troops in Iraq. Now we have troops in Syria. We're supplying weapons that are being used in Yemen. All of this matters, and I think it matters for the public to be aware of it.
Yeah, I mean, there's part of me that goes, if these are secret operations, and we want to make sure that they are secret operations because we got 50 people in harm's way doing something. I'm hoping someone's paying attention to it. Is it stuff that we want to be broadcasting? And it's one of those weird things that I often wonder: are we doing anyone a service by saying, "Oh, they're super secret this or that"? But we're talking about it. It can't be all that super secret.
Well, we know that they're there, but do we know where they are? Do we really know who they're working with? Do we know what equipment they have? We don't really know these things, and these are things that the Pentagon won't say either.
Yeah, I often wonder about that. I don't actually know. I don't know what the answer is, but if I were one of those 50, I don't think I'd want everyone knowing that I was even there. So just kind of my thoughts. So what does this mean? We're sending another 250. Some would say we're ramping up. Some would say, this is just support. How should we take this then?
So I could tell you what the Pentagon says.
Okay.
They say that these forces, these 250, are going to go on to act as force multipliers in the same sort of roles that you saw that initial 50. They said that these people can bring the full weight of the U.S. military to the ground without actually using U.S. troops. And one of the reasons the Obama administration doesn't want to use U.S. troops is because you could peer back at what Iraq was and this huge ground invasion that left And then when we pulled out, right, there was no one there to actually keep that territory. So this time around, they're thinking, well, if we use local forces, then when we leave, there's people there to keep the territory. And yeah, so.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like a great idea. So how did the other campaigns, I guess we should start with the Republicans, because I'm sure anything that Obama does, they're against. So how did the three on the Republican side, how'd they respond?
Of course, it's never enough. We've seen, especially Ted Cruz wants to see more of a military engagement. You've heard him say in the past that he would carpet bomb, right, Syria, and yeah, they want more. That's mostly it.
So
they see this is not enough, and that's the same thing coming out of Congress on the Republican side of things. Senator John McCain said today that he welcomed the 250 additional troops, but said it wasn't enough and didn't come in time either.
So this is one of those issues for this campaign season that I don't think a lot of people are talking about, because on the Republican side, it sounds like they're beating the drum to let's go back, let's have Iraq 3.
Yeah, People think times that this war against ISIS is incremental and it's just going to keep on dragging on unless the U.S. does more. And yeah, like you said, I don't know if it will be Iraq 3 if we
or Afghanistan
put a large
2 or
ground contingent in again, but that is something that many candidates want to see.
So now on the other side,
of those there.
Yeah, has Hillary or Bernie weighed in on this? Have you seen any reports there?
I haven't seen their direct response to this 250 number. Hillary has stayed fairly in line with what Obama has proposed thus far. Bernie has actually wanted less U.S. involvement. He's wanted to see local actors play a greater role.
Right. Because I look at it, and there's a lot of reporting going on that Hillary would be much more of a hawk than say President Obama is, and that maybe she won't be as far and as extreme as the Republicans, but she's probably a little bit more interested in intervention than Sanders would be. Would that be a fair characterization?
I think that's completely fair.
Yeah.
Right. You saw Secretary Clinton under President Obama, and if you take a look back at what her policy was during her time as Secretary of the State, you could probably foresee how she'd behave as president.
There you go. And that's why here in Pennsylvania tomorrow, a lot of decisions to be made as primary day is tomorrow. And I hope folks will get out and vote. There are people who've fought and died for that right. It's the foundation of this experiment of what I believe makes this country exceptional. We should not let it pass by. So lastly, anything else going on at the Pentagon? Any other thoughts on this that we should know about?
Any other thoughts on this? Well, I will note that just last week, the Pentagon announced that they were sending 217 additional troops to Iraq. So I think it's worth noting that this is reaching a point in this military campaign where the administration has decided to up the involvement. Whether it will be continued to up or whether it'll level off, unclear at this point. One of the main tenets is that Obama wants to play the field. He wants to take a step and then see the reaction to that step and then make his next decision. Yeah. So it's important stuff to pay attention to. It's confusing, but you can wade through it.
No, it's something that I think is important that we talk about. And you're right. The more we keep sending, and it seems drips and drabs. This isn't a surge, but we're definitely putting more people's children on the ground there. Mm-hmm. That's simple. Lori, I appreciate the time. Great talking with you.
Thank you.
Always great, Lori Lewis, Pentagon correspondent for Talk Media News Service. Quick break, right back. Stick around. You listen to The Rick Smith Show. Where working people come to talk.
Radio of, for, and by we the working people. The Rick Smith Show.
Wow, $5 billion. That's the stunning amount that Goldman Sachs has agreed to pay to settle federal criminal charges over its shameful financial scams that helped wreck America's economy in 2008. That's a lot of gold, even for Goldman. Yet, the Wall Street powerhouse says it's, quote, pleased to swallow this sour slug of medicine. Is that because its executives are contrite? Oh, come on. Banksters don't do contrite. Rather, they are pleased with the settlement because, thanks to backroom dealing with friendly prosecutors, it's riddled with special loopholes that could eliminate nearly $2 billion from the publicized punishment. For example, the deal calls for the felonious bank to put $250 million into affordable housing, but generous federal negotiators put incentives and credits in the fine print that will let Goldman escape with paying out less than a third of that. Also, about $2.5 billion of the settlement is to be paid to consumers hurt by the financial crisis. But the deal lets the banks deduct almost $1 billion of this payout from its corporate tax, meaning you and I will subsidize Goldman's payment. As a bank reform advocate puts it, the problem with these settlements is that they are carefully crafted more to conceal than to reveal to the American public what really happened here. This is Jim Hightower saying, one more reason Wall Street bankers privately wink and grin at these seemingly huge punishments is that even paying the full $5 billion would only be relatively painful. To you and me, that sounds like a crushing number. But Goldman Sachs raked in $33 billion in revenue last year alone, so it's a reasonable cost of doing business. After all, Goldman sold tens of billions of dollars in the fraudulent investment packages leading to the settlement. So the bottom line is that crime can actually pay if it's big enough.
Hightower's commentaries are brought to you by the Hightower Lowdown, the monthly newsletter with Hightower's take on what Wall Street and Washington are up to. For information, visit hightowerlowdown.org.
From UN headquarters in New York, this is your World in 2 Minutes. I'm your host, Luke Vargas, for Talk Media News. The United States signed on to the 2015 Paris Agreement on Friday, joining 170 other nations in backing the most robust climate change treaty to date. In remarks before signing the treaty, Secretary of State John Kerry praised the deal that he helped to craft.
The power of this agreement is not that it, in and of itself, guarantees that we will actually hold the increase of temperature to the target of 1.5 degrees or 2 degrees centigrade. In fact, it does not, and we know that. We acknowledge it. The power of this agreement is the opportunity that it creates. The power is the message that it sends to the marketplace.
UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon said he's already looking forward to next steps.
The next critical step is to ensure that the agreement enters into force as soon as possible.
The difference between signing the deal and it entering into force is important. To become legally binding, the Paris Agreement requires ratification by 55 countries representing 55% of global carbon emissions. Just 15 countries came to the UN on Friday with ratifications in hand, and most of them were small island nations that emit little. But there looks to be progress just down the road, as the U.S. and China plan their own ratifications. China said Friday that its national legal process should be complete by September, while John Kerry said the U.S. will formally join the agreement this year. Since Senate approval of the treaty is unlikely, President Obama reportedly intends to sign on to the Paris Accord through executive action. The U.S. and China combine to account for roughly 40% of global emissions. After John Kerry affixed his signature to the Paris Agreement, the UN General Assembly erupted in applause. For more global news headlines, visit TalkMediaNews.com.
Waving the flag of freedom for people, not corporations. Rick Smith.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. This is one of those stories that you go, wow. Is it courage? Is it, being 90 years old and saying, I don't really give a rat's behind? But how many people remember Harris Wohlford? I remember I met him back in, I think it was 1994. I was working on a campaign for Paul McHale, who was in Congress at the time out in the Allentown area. And I remember I was working on it, and I met him for, it was like a brief couple of minutes. And he was the senator, he was the senator that Rick Santorum eventually beat. But he was the senator there in the U.S. Senate. He wrote an op-ed. And the reason that now he is back in the news, the 90-year-old former senator from Pennsylvania, Harris Wofford, is marrying a guy 50 years younger. Yeah, I did say that. A guy 50 years younger. Harris Wofford was married to a woman for 48 years, Claire, and he described it as happily married. Evidently met this Matthew Charlton guy back 15 years ago when he was 75 and Matthew was 25 in Fort Lauderdale. They are now getting married, and as he wrote in his op-ed, that he believes, it's more about love than it is about labels. And he says, look, we don't want to get into labeling things. I just love this person, and they're getting married. I understand that they are going to, according to the stories that I've read, they're going to exchange traditional vows, whatever that means. And they promise to be bound together and, in monogamous matrimony, which, again, define it however you will. I'm not opposed to it. These are two people who care about each other, and good on them. And anyone who would say anything, screw them. I'm happy for the guy, for the both of them, if that's what they want. Now, the thing that is interesting about Wofford is if you go back, he was actually a civil rights advisor to JFK. And yes, that's how long he's been around. But, a guy who obviously of courage, willing to step forward. The thing that's kind of interesting to me is he was always someone who didn't think it was possible to have, marriage equality. Always one of those people who didn't push for it because he didn't think it was possible. Now I give him credit for stepping forward and announcing to the world that this is where he's at in his life, and good for him. I wish them both happiness and longevity. Although at 90, got to be honest, it is what it is. Anyway, not sure what's going on. I just got a text. It appears my grandmother is not doing well at all. So there's a possibility. We'll be running a best of tomorrow, as I may have to travel back to my hometown of Cleveland for the funeral and for other things. So I thought I'd just throw that out there, put it on the agenda. But I'm hoping to be back. Tomorrow. Thanks for being here. One way or another, there'll be something here tomorrow. Thanks so much.
You've been listening to The Rick Smith Show. Together, we can make America better. Email rick@thericksmithshow.com or interact with us anytime at thericksmithshow.com. Until next time, this has been The Rick Smith Show, where working people come to talk.
Its color like the tide of flood beneath the lunar sway. Imperial, mysterious, in